Better buckle up, because you're about to explore some of the world's riskiest and nerve-wracking roads. You better pack some water and snacks, and prepare for exquisite views and extreme weather. And most importantly, no matter what you do, don't look down. Let's start with the Asian Karakorum Highway, the highest paved road in the world. It's located at 16,000 feet above sea level. It also stretches for more than 800 miles. If you're a history fan, you'll be pleased to know it follows part of the old Silk Road, an ancient trade route that connected Asia with the West. People used the road to carry goods and ideas between two great civilizations. As it splits the most mountainous region in the world, the Karakorum Highway is quite unpredictable. Rocks can often fall here, and there are also a lot of landslides, avalanches, and floods. When you take into consideration heavy snowfalls and herds of wild animals, you might decide to avoid the road altogether if you're not the most skilled driver. Not a fan of storms either? Well, you really shouldn't be here, trust me. The construction of this road began in the 1960s, and it's a popular tourist attraction these days. Given the altitude and lack of road barriers, many visitors also experience altitude sickness here, which can make driving even riskier. Meanwhile, the Dalton Highway in Alaska isn't a walk in the park either. For starters, at times it gets slippery, which can give a headache to even the most experienced of drivers. This 400-mile-long road stretches through remote forests and over the Yukon River. Since there are only 3 towns along the road, people who need to drive on the Dalton Highway are strongly encouraged to bring their own gear and lots of supplies. The road has a 240-mile stretch with no gas stations, restaurants, hotels, and whatnot. It's the longest stretch of road with no services in North America. What makes the highway even more difficult to travel on is that most of the road is made from gravel. In the winter, it gets even more complicated since the road becomes a lot more slippery. The North Yungas Road is thought to be the world's most dangerous. Why? Well, maybe because it's a single-lane dirt road? Most probably. It connects the cities of La Paz and Coroico, stretching along the side of the Cordillera Oriental Mountains. Should you ever feel the need to look over the edge here, you'd be astonished to see that the ground really is far away, 4,000 to 15,000 feet down. The road was built in the 1930s. Its widest part is 12 feet. With the side, people driving here often have to deal with thick fog, heavy rain, and even some loose rocks every now and then. Add limited visibility and more than 200 hairpin turns to the mix. As scary as it sounds, this famous route is still one of the most popular tourist attractions in Bolivia. Heading over to New Zealand, you're about to visit a 140-year-old unpaved road carved into the side of a mountain. It's so dangerous that you have to get a special permit to drive on it. And don't even think about renting a car, as most rental companies won't allow their vehicles to go to that area. And the standard insurance won't cover any issues you might face there. Bummer. This narrow road goes almost vertically to the Shotover River. So, if you come across another vehicle on the way, you certainly won't be able to pass each other. You'll most likely need to reverse for up to 2 miles to reach a wider part of the road. Local tour operators can take visitors up the canyon if you're really eager to visit the area, and most people are. Why? Well, because this road was a popular backdrop for a lot of movies. Looking for some peace and quiet? The Canning Stock route might just be the place for you. You won't get any views here, just a lot of dust and barely anyone around. Not to mention, there aren't many road signs, and it's really easy to get lost here. This completely secluded road stretches for 1,150 miles. You can find it in Western Australia. You'll need 3 weeks to drive it from start to finish, so it's best if you book yourself some time off work if you really plan on visiting. Just don't start your journey in the summer months, as the temperatures there can be almost unbearable. Don't forget to pack plenty of food, water, and spare parts. And most importantly, don't drive alone. You'd better follow a convoy of experienced drivers. Not all of the dangerous roads in the world are located on the edges of mountains or in a desert. Some seem quite unremarkable at first glance, like Commonwealth Avenue in the Philippines. At first glance, it's a regular highway that is a mere 7.5 miles long. But it has 18 lanes and a lot of heavy traffic. It also gets flooded pretty often because of the poor drainage system. And since motorbikes and pedestrians often cross the road in the most unexpected places, a lot of accidents happen here, sometimes also because of poor visibility and excessive speed. Now, let's head to the Bayburt-Of Road in Turkey. But you really should skip this one if you're scared of landslides or have ever experienced vertigo. This dangerous road is located on the shore of the Black Sea in the northeastern part of the country. Why is it so perilous, you might ask? Well, for starters, you won't find any protective guardrails separating the road from the abyss. Apart from the spectacular view, there's really no point in challenging yourself to go here if you're not a professional driver. The road has a total of 13 hairpin turns at a height of 5,600 to 6,700 feet above sea level, and all that on a stretch of a mere 3 miles. And the incline is also steep, up to 10%. Morocco has a scary road of its own. It's called the Tizi and Test Pass. It's a tight, winding road that goes through the Atlas Mountains. It was constructed by blasting out mountain rocks back in the 1920s. Again, it's one of those places you should avoid if you're afraid of heights and steep roads. But if you can deal with these tough conditions, you'll be rewarded with amazing views. There are no safety barriers along the road either, so it's best to travel on it only during the day when it's light. In the winter, landslides and avalanches are a daily occurrence here. Keep that in mind if your car is not prepared for this kind of weather. The Atlantic Road in Averøy, Norway, can offer you a real 3D experience. It winds through a small group of scenic islands in this northern European country. But as beautiful as it might look, it's one of Norway's most dangerous roads. Why? Well, because at times it makes you feel like you're on a real-life roller coaster. The road has a lot of twists and turns. You'll also need to be ready for some serious bouts of bad weather. That's probably the reason why visibility is often reduced here. More so, if you have to drive on this road on a stormy day, you'll have to deal with strong winds and huge waves. Moving on, it's often called the best road in the world by fans of driving, but in reality, it isn't for the faint-hearted either. Transfăgărășan is a road in Romania, and is probably the most famous one in this country. It winds through some of the highest mountains in this Eastern European country, the Făgăraș Mountains. You won't be able to drive on this road from late autumn to late spring, as it's closed to the public because of frequent heavy snowfalls. Even during the summer, this road is closed from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. for additional safety. Not a fan of bears? Then you probably ought to skip this road, as bears often pop up in this location. These animals aren't dangerous if you don't interact with them, reach out, or offer them any food. Just the bare necessities.
Planning your next trip? You need to find accommodation, book airline tickets, and what else? Make sure you're safe on the road, of course. Some tourists actively seek dangerous destinations, though. The Yungas region in western Bolivia is the perfect place to find adventure. It's home to one of the most perilous tourist destinations on the planet, Carretera de la Muerte, the Death Road. The Yungas Road is around 43 miles long. It connects the capital city of La Paz to a town in the Amazon basin of Bolivia. The local bus covers the distance in some 3 to 4 hours. But why so long? The road from San Francisco to San Jose is roughly the same length. You can cover this distance in under an hour by car. So, what's stopping drivers from doing the same on the Yungas? It's more than one thing. If you want to drive to the Bolivian capital, you'll set off at an elevation of 5,000 feet. But when you reach your destination, you'll be at a staggering 12,000 feet above sea level. After all, La Paz is the highest capital city in the world. If these figures are making you dizzy, you might want to sit down before you hear the next number. The highest peak on the whole road, La Cumbre, sits at more than 15,000 feet. That's the height people go skydiving from. Such high mountains aren't the best place to build a road. But the engineers didn't place the road here for no reason. It's an important trade route. Trucks transport everything from coffee to tropical fruit along the Yungas Road. It's nearly a century old, constructed in the 1930s. In most places, the road is unpaved. Its main surface is a mix of dirt and gravel. The workers carved it out of an almost vertical mountainside. Look down and you'll feel vertigo. There's a drop of some 2,000 feet. It's impossible not to think about this while driving. But there are at least 2 lanes, right? Not quite. Because of the terrain, there's only 1 lane, if you can call it that. The road is rarely wider than 10 feet. By comparison, a Tesla Model S is 6.5 feet wide, and that's without the mirrors sticking out on each side. That would be one tight squeeze. But believe it or not, even large trucks go up and down this path. For the most part, there are no guardrails to prevent the vehicles from dropping into the abyss. And then there's the weather. In summer, the dust from the vehicles decreases visibility, and fog often appears, making the drivers feel as if they were driving blindfolded. In winter, it's no better. Heavy rains make the road muddy and slippery. Torrents can wash away whole sections of the roadway. Landslides occur frequently. A boulder can fall on an unsuspecting driver at any moment. Sounds more like an obstacle course than a roadway. The only good side is that you shower on the go. There are natural waterfalls along the way that travelers use to wash themselves. Until 2006, this mountain highway was the only way to reach the capital from the Yungas region. That's why buses and trucks of all sizes had to squeeze along cliff edges. Sadly, some of them never made it to their destination. On average, 26 vehicles plummet over the edge each year. The total cost in human life? 200 to 300 people lose their lives each year on the Yungas Road. That's really sad. The Bolivian authorities were determined to change something. It took them a full 20 years, but they finally constructed an alternative road. It runs along a nearby mountain range. The new bypass has 2 paved lanes. It's secured with guardrails, and it even has drainage. This helped relieve pressure from the old and dangerous route. Today, there is significantly less traffic than in the 90s. At that time, the Inter-American Development Bank proclaimed the route as the most dangerous road in the world. In come the tourists. Yes, after the locals could finally travel safely across the region, travelers from all over the world took on the challenging road. Tens of thousands of them flocked to the road in search of adrenaline, mostly traveling by bike. But the path is still dangerous. Since 1998, at least 25 cyclists have lost their lives here. The road is so narrow that you don't have enough space to brake. The side of the road is lined with memorials to people who perished riding their bicycles here. But the Bolivian highway isn't the only dangerous destination tourists like to visit. In Africa, there is a natural pool at the very edge of Victoria Falls. It becomes accessible only in the dry season. That's when the water level of the mighty Zambezi River drops enough to reveal the pool. People come here to take amazing photos, but they're just inches away from danger. A rock lip forms the edge of the pool. If a careless swimmer goes beyond it, there is a huge drop, well over 300 feet. The danger is very real. Tourists often forget they're in the middle of a powerful river. More than 1 million gallons of water cascade down Victoria Falls every minute. A complete lack of water can be dangerous as well. That is the case in one region of California, Death Valley. This is the hottest place on Earth. Temperatures here reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit. But tourists are attracted to these extreme conditions. In 2022 alone, more than 1 million people visited the area. Trekking in this desert landscape is highly dangerous. Even driving can cost people their lives. If you have a car accident here, the heat will soon get to you. Dehydration and heat stroke are real dangers. And if that wasn't enough, there are rattlesnakes. 7 species of snakes live in the Mojave Desert. Back in Europe, Ireland is a popular travel destination. In 2019, 19 million people visited the Emerald Isle. That's close to 4 times the population of the Republic of Ireland. Tourists first explore Dublin, but then they want to see the countryside. And the biggest attraction there is as dangerous as it is beautiful: the Cliffs of Moher. They stand on the island's rugged west side. Visitors who try to get close to their edge for a better photo are risking their lives. The drop is 700 feet. One wrong step, and they can fall down from a height greater than the height of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Sadly, this has already happened several times in the past. In Florida, there is a place that looks like a dream to any American surfer: New Smyrna Beach. But there is a danger lurking beneath the waves: sharks. New Smyrna is a hotspot for them. A surfer paddling on his board looks like a seal to the shark below, and seals are their main prey. Since 2010, there have been 32 reported shark attacks in the area. That's why people call this section of the coastline the most dangerous beach in America. Not your ideal summer destination, definitely. Maybe it's better to go to Hawaii. Or not. This atoll hides dangers of its own. The Hawaiian Islands were formed by volcanic activity. These volcanoes attract tourists from all over the world. But slow-flowing lava isn't what's going to get you. It's poisonous gases. Can you guess what VOG is? No, I'm not speaking about the fashion magazine. This is volcanic smog, a mixture of ash and sulfur dioxide. That's the toxic gas you smell when you light a match. And when the lava flow hits the salt water in the ocean, you get lays, or lava haze. These plumes can travel up to 15 miles downwind. And they're not pleasant to inhale. Your eyes become dry, and your throat starts to itch. And those are the less severe symptoms. In a span of just 20 years, 5 tourists passed away due to exposure to volcanic gases.
There's an electric massage chair inside your car so that your back doesn't hurt, and a small exercise bike to get your legs in shape. You open the built-in mini fridge, take out a couple of meatballs, and heat them up with the built-in microwave. Bored? There's a TV with internet, and for later, a bio toilet installed in the back seat. Kind of cramped, but nice and cozy. You're not a millionaire, just an ordinary person. Your car is the most average, like billions of others. All these amenities inside are crucial. But why? Well, you spend most of your life in your car. There are about 1.5 billion cars in the world, most of them passenger cars. The roads are already pretty packed, and it's impossible to find parking at certain times of the day. But what if there were 7 times more cars? Imagine that humanity just found a huge deposit of metals. Trillions of tons of iron, nickel, aluminum, bronze, silver, and lead. All over the world, their prices tumble. Metals replace ceramics, wood, and plastics. At the same time, automakers develop a fully integrated AI car assembly system. Smart robots use metal alloys to 3D print parts on the go. They can build a car in a matter of hours. Pretty soon, you can buy a car cheaper than a new pair of sneakers. People buy several cars at once. Luxury car brands lose a lot of money, since all cars now are of much higher quality. Oh boy, more and more traffic jams are popping up everywhere. People start to panic and shut down all new car production. But it's too late. Every single person on Earth already has a car. Now, to get to the nearest supermarket, you have to spend at least 90 minutes in traffic. You can't walk either, because the exhaust fumes are insane. A 10-minute walk around the block gives you a nasty cough. Inside a car, though, you can crank up the air purification system and breathe deeply. There are thousands of service stations that don't just do repairs anymore. They also equip your interior to make your drive more convenient. You recently got a game console installed. Why would you ever leave your car anymore? Your ears are always ringing. Even if you're at home, trying to fall asleep, you can still hear cars honking outside. You're so used to it, it actually sounds like silence. You don't remember the last time you drove faster than 20 miles per hour. You've forgotten what speed is. Highways, byways, local streets, parking lots, every inch of road is filled with cars. So you're crawling to the supermarket. You look out the window and see your friend in the lane next to you. You have a chat, he shares some snacks with you, and you hand him a wireless controller so you can play each other on your new game console. Traffic jams are bringing people together. You don't really know anything about your friend, but you've met up almost every weekend on the way to the supermarket. You even finished a few video games together over the past month, just in the car. While playing your video game, you accidentally hit and scratch someone else's car. But the driver doesn't turn around or say anything. All cars these days have minor damage. It's impossible to avoid when everyone's packed in so tight. Insurance companies don't even deal with scratches and bumps anymore. A few years ago, a scratch on your new car would have ruined your whole day. But now, you don't care. And roads are a lot less dangerous. What's the worst that can happen when everyone's doing 15 down the highway? Motorbikes are becoming really rare. It's just that much fun to ride along at a slower than snail's pace. People make new motorbike clubs, and most ride out in the woods. You finally arrive at the supermarket. Good thing there's a 20-story parking building nearby. There's also an underground lot. After shopping, you spend another hour getting home. If you live in an apartment, there's one more step you've got to go through. There's a special vertical parking structure on every block. You drive in, get out, and the car gets lifted up into a sea of parked cars. But it's expensive. You're trying to save up for a trip, so you try your luck parking on the street. When you finally find a spot, you realize you're 5 miles from home. When you get out, take a look at the mountain of groceries you'll have to carry and decide to spend the night in your car. It's got everything you need, except for a hot shower. There are cars parked everywhere, all with people inside. They're spending the night just like you. You lie back and look up through the sunroof at the dull gray sky and realize you haven't seen the sun, crisp white clouds, or blue skies for a long time. The exhaust from all the cars forms a constant thick haze. You can't see more than a block in any direction. Some are starting to say that we should abandon our cars, melt them down, and store the scrap metal deep underground. Exhaust fumes are a real problem for people. Breathing, playing sports, playing outside, those are considered really dangerous these days. The worst part for you is that you haven't heard a single bird sing for ages, even out in the suburbs. Let's say one day your car breaks down. Something wrong with the engine. It takes you a few hours to even get to the nearest garage. Now you need to wait for your turn. Millions of car repair companies have sprung up all over the world, but it's not nearly enough to keep up with demand. The waiting list for a major car issue can be over a year. That's why you decided ages ago to buy mechanic textbooks online and watch instructional videos on YouTube for at least an hour on the weekends. Somehow, you managed to fix your busted engine. You share your success on Instagram, and your friends are impressed. Maybe you could open up your own YouTube channel, helping people fix their own cars. The auto industry is developing and changing every month. The newest craze? You no longer have to go to the supermarket for food. Bus shops appear all over the city. You're waiting in traffic and see a supermarket on wheels in the left lane. You hop out of your car, get on the bus, and buy everything you need, if you can squeeze through the cars to get there and back. If you don't want to wiggle your way around all those cars, you can just jump from roof to roof. Nobody cares anymore. A few weeks later, you start seeing hospitals on wheels, libraries, cafes, even gyms. Some clever truck owners refitted their vehicles into gyms on wheels. Someone installed a projector in their convertible and now shows movies on a tarp they set up on the SUV in front of them. But your favorite of these new services? Museums on wheels. Each museum is an extra-long refitted school bus. The air problem eventually gets solved by electric vehicles. Soon, everyone switched over, and you can finally breathe fresh air. It feels like honey in your lungs. The sky is finally turning blue. To relieve the crazy traffic, cities start building underground tunnels, and soon, traffic jams are, well, they're still ridiculous. Years pass. The structure of the human skeleton changes. People have been sitting in their cars so long that their spines have become weak. People need to exercise more. Some people go to extreme lengths. They rip the engine out of their car and install a sort of pedal system. Now, to get anywhere, they need to pedal. A lot. Every year, people try to make their cars more advanced. The problems with air quality and people's health have been solved. The last big challenge? Getting rid of traffic jams permanently. Scientists and engineers create a gravity engine that you can buy if you're a millionaire. Basically, you can float your car to work. Not every driver can afford it, but almost everyone can afford to install a powerful propeller in their car. Helicar time! The roads get freer and way less congested, but there's serious new problems up there in the sky. Anyway, that's another story.
The freezing temperatures of the Arctic Circle, intense off-road driving in the searing heat of the Sahara Desert, not to mention wild animals that are ready to pounce without warning. That's what a journey of a giant block of ice looked like. The thing was moved from the Arctic Circle all the way to the scorching equator in the back of a pickup truck. Rewind back to 1959, when the world was going through some tough times and a cola cost you a nickel. Radio Luxembourg presented its listeners with a challenge. It was to transport 3 tons of ice from the Arctic Circle to the equator. Anyone could take part in this adventure. The only condition, and a tough one at that, was that no refrigerator could be used throughout the journey. To make things even spicier, they offered a reward for those who could do it. A whopping 50,000 francs for each pound of ice that remained at the end of the journey, which would be around $9,000 per pound these days. And if someone managed to deliver the entire block, they could get around $50 million. As soon as the challenge was announced, the guys from the radio just kicked back and waited for the laughs to pour in. But Börje Notvik wasn't laughing. At that time, he needed money to develop his business, which was manufacturing glass wool insulation. If the man succeeded, he could help his family and employees. So, his company, Glasvat, based in Norway, took on the challenge and surprised everyone around, especially the radio station. It seemed to be an impossible task. No one had ever accomplished such a feat. The total distance was around 5,000 miles, all in the boiling sun. It would probably melt the entire ice block even before it reached the shores of Europe. But Börje was a smart man and had a brilliant plan up his sleeve. The radio company figured out what the man was going to do. They realized how much they would lose if he were to succeed. The result? They canceled the entire money reward. When Börje heard of the news, he was at a loss. He'd already gone to the Arctic Circle and prepared to excavate some ice. Luckily, before he knew it, the situation gathered so much media attention that sponsors from 8 different countries lined up to support Notvik's journey. Famous petrol company Shell provided his expedition with fuel, and transport manufacturer Scania gave them a pickup truck. Börje Notvik and his team started to cut through ice. Of course, they couldn't get a single piece that would weigh 3 tons. That's why they chopped up several 450-pound blocks of ice, and then they transported all those pieces by helicopter to the town center. Then, they melted them together to create a giant chunk of ice. After that, the ice was supposed to be placed in the back of a large pickup truck, but it wasn't enough to prevent it from melting, and the team couldn't use any methods of refrigeration. Börje decided to put the ice in a specially constructed iron container insulated with glass wool and wood. It would keep the ice more or less intact without breaking the rules of the challenge. It was a very clever way of insulating. Glass wool is made of melted glass fibers. The air gets trapped between the thin glass strands and can't flow out. This way, there are no dramatic temperature changes. Along with the massive chunk of ice, the truck also carried around 650 pounds of medicines. They had to be delivered to a hospital that was on the way of the expedition. On February 22, 1959, the epic journey across the continents began. It started in Norway. Then the team traveled through Copenhagen, Hamburg, Brussels, Paris, and Marseille. In Europe, almost everyone knew about the unusual journey. Notvik and his people were greeted with cheers and claps as they drove through large cities and small towns. The roads were well paved and weather conditions didn't bring any problems. News spread even further south when the expedition reached Paris. By that time, they'd already become celebrities. The police even escorted them through some of the busiest streets to make way for the truck carrying the ice. The mayor invited Börjer and his team for lunch. The ice was in good condition until it arrived at the port of Marseille. That's when things started to look challenging. The team had to use a crane to lift the pickup truck and load it on the ship. It was supposed to take them to the coast of Algeria. Notvik and his people realized they were about to start the most difficult part of the trip. Bye-bye to the cool landscapes of Europe. They'd have to endure the scorching sun of the desert before being able to finish their trip. Soon enough, they were on their way to the final destination, but the ice was melting away much faster than before. That's why the expedition had to move at an ever-increasing speed. But it turned out to be challenging. It was almost impossible not to get stuck in the sand. At that time, the Sahara had no paved roads for miles on end. So, Börjer and his crew had to dig their heavily loaded car out of the sand in the scorching sun. Every day, the temperatures got higher and higher. Sometimes, it was hotter than 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The truck got stuck more and more often. The ice was melting faster than before. It seemed to be just a matter of time before all they were transporting across the Sahara was a large swimming pool filled with cool water. And still, no one was ready to give up and to go back home. They made camps in the desert during the nights and kept driving during the days. The finish line was right there. They came across many friendly nomadic tribes that were traveling on camels' backs. These desert dwellers helped the expedition with some food. In return, the crew offered them the most unique water the locals would ever have: melted ice from the Arctic. Nomads know how to survive the extreme temperatures of the Sahara Desert. They're accustomed to such an unusual lifestyle. But they would have tough times without camels. Often called the ships of the desert, these unique animals store fat in their humps. When camels can't find any food or water in the desert, they turn this fat into energy. Anyway, after many days under the burning sun, Notvik and his people finally left the desert and entered the jungle of Gabon. Soon, they reached Libreville, their final destination. Many locals gathered around to witness history in the making and one of the most bizarre road trips ever. The ice was still in one piece. Börjer and his crew were in one piece, and it only took them 27 days to get from Norway to Libreville. Not bad. But the main question was how much ice had melted away. They waited and did all the necessary calculations, and then their jaws dropped. At the beginning of their journey, the weight of the ice block was 6,700 pounds, but now the ice measured to be 6,000 pounds, which meant that only around 700 pounds of ice had melted away, even after it had traveled halfway across the world through different countries and different climates. The whole world was shocked to find out about the outcome of the expedition. Apparently, if you transported a giant block of ice from the Arctic Circle to the equator, you'd only lose 11% of that ice along the way. Notvik gave most of the ice to the locals. These people had never seen or touched frozen water before. The rest of the ice was flown back home to Norway. It was then used for the drinks at numerous press conferences. The return journey was much easier. The members of the expedition simply flew back by plane. Charles de Gaulle, the president of France at that time, offered to personally greet them in Paris if they drove back by truck. But the exhausted team declined. Nothing would make them drive through the desert again. The journey was a success, even though there was no reward money for the challenge. The expedition reached its goal, and Burrier attracted worldwide attention to his company and its products.
If you walk through this small stone doorway in Hierapolis, Turkey, you might never come back alive. Back in ancient times, people thought it was some sort of portal to the underworld. Romans would go in carrying perfectly healthy bulls, but after a few minutes, they would watch these animals collapse as if hit by some mysterious force. But what's even weirder is that nothing happened to people. They could walk in and out just fine. Now, recent studies might have an answer for these eerie happenings, and it all has to do with people's heights. The gate, known as Plutonium, named after Pluto, the deity of the underworld, is a stone doorway leading to a small 32-square-foot cave. But the real danger is what is going on beneath it. Hierapolis is a super active geological area, and there's a big crack under the city that constantly emits volcanic carbon dioxide, which comes up as a visible mist. During the day, the sun dissipates the gas. At night, the gas forms some kind of a carbon dioxide lake on the sheltered arena floor. At dawn, you need to get out of there before it's too late. This whole place can turn particularly life-threatening right before the sun rises, when the carbon dioxide concentration, about 15 inches above the arena floor, reaches 35%. That means birds, bulls, and even humans can suffocate and pass away in just a couple of minutes. But there is a scientific reason that explains how Romans could get out of there unharmed. The carbon dioxide concentration drops quickly with height, so animals perished while their handlers, being taller and standing up, could walk out and breathe safely. Most people can't stay inside the Bayburt fort after sunset. This 16th century fort, located about 146 miles from Delhi, is known as one of the most haunted places in India. During the day, the area is bustling with visitors who can walk through the main gate of this once grand fort city and check out the ruins of temples and palaces. But they will also see this big sign at the gate that dramatically warns everybody that all access is strictly forbidden after dark. That's probably because at night, according to locals, women can be heard screaming and crying in that place, along with the sounds of bangles breaking and strange music. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures and flashing lights among the ruins, or even smelling a strange perfume floating around. Yawata no Yabushirasu is one of Japan's most restricted forests, located in Ichikawa. The forest itself is a small area, covering just a little more than 40 square yards, and it is mostly a thick patch of mosu bamboo. Its location next to a parking lot and modern buildings makes it seem less intimidating. But don't be mistaken by its appearance. Since at least the 19th century, people have said that anyone who enters this forest is bound to disappear and never be seen again. So, as soon as you arrive, a sign near the forest tells you about its history and the curse believed to be linked to it. Some rumors suggest the creepy presence of an ancient samurai lord walking around. Other legends say that the forest hides a bottomless pit filled with poisonous gas. Whether these stories are true or not, today, the area is enclosed by stone walls, and entry is still strictly prohibited. In a valley called the Dark Entry Forest in Connecticut, you will find Dudleytown, but you definitely shouldn't go inside. Not only has the land been private property since the 1920s, but it is also known as one of the spookiest places on Earth. This place was first settled in the early 1740s, and many of the original settlers were from the Dudley family. That's why it's called Dudleytown. There's a local rumor that the town's founders were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who lost his life for treason. The legend says this curse followed the Dudley family all the way across the Atlantic to America, and their misfortune is said to be responsible for crop failures, mental problems, and several tragic incidents in the village. Again, it is all just rumors, since historians haven't found any real evidence to support these claims. Still, the pitch-black surroundings and the eerie Blair Witch Project vibe going on in that place fueled ghost stories in the 1980s. This led to many cases of vandalism in the following decade, and because of that, the landowners closed the area to the public. This old abandoned building used to be the fancy palace of King Farouk's family, who was the penultimate king of Egypt back in 1936. After his family members passed away, the palace was turned into a morgue. Locals say that today, the whole place is super creepy and off-limits. Some people have reported seeing light bulbs flicker and shadows move around, making strange noises. Once, a group of kids allegedly went inside and totally freaked out when they found all the doors had suddenly disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. They had no choice but to start screaming for help. This Hawaiian island has been off-limits to people for over a century. It's called Ni'iau and is the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, covering around 69.5 square miles. It has around 84 residents. The island doesn't have cell phone service, paved roads, or power lines, just solar panels for electricity. A single family has privately owned the island since 1864, when a Scottish farmer bought it for $10,000, which would be around $250,000 today. The island has stayed in the family, passing down to its descendants, the Robinsons. They have kept it private ever since, so access is highly restricted and basically by invitation only. The Erdstall tunnels are a network of about 2,000 mysterious underground passageways mainly found in Central Europe, especially in Austria and Bavaria. These tunnels are usually narrow and cramped, often just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and they are believed to date back to the Middle Ages, as far back as the 12th century. What's really puzzling about these tunnels is their purpose. Despite a lot of research, nobody really knows why they were built. There is a theory that they were used for storage, but since many of them are below the water line and occasionally get filled with water, that doesn't seem very practical. These tunnels have very light, almost claustrophobic sections and sudden drops, which doesn't seem practical for other straightforward uses like escape routes, hiding places, or even spiritual purposes. To make things even more mysterious, there is a complete lack of artifacts, which makes it even harder for researchers to figure out what these tunnels were really for. Since 2019, adventurous people can get arrested if they try to climb this rock. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, has been off-limits because it is now considered a sacred site for local communities. But the fact that it is also extremely dangerous probably played a big role in the decision to close it off to visitors. This rock is 1,142 feet high, which is about the height of an 80-story building. The climb to the summit can be very slippery, and high temperatures, which can hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, have led to people passing away from dehydration and heat-related issues. Something even creepier happens at the top of the rock right after storms. When it rains, small tadpole-like crustaceans called shield shrimp hatch in temporary water holes and rock pools on top of Uluru. These extraterrestrial-looking creatures are about 3 inches long, and they spread their super-resilient eggs everywhere. When enough summer rain comes, they hatch and go wild, feeding on microorganisms and bacteria in the water. How these strange creatures end up in the fleeting pools on top of Uluru is still unclear, but the most likely explanation is that their eggs might travel there with the wind.
Everyone loves a good landmark. The Roman Colosseum, the ancient city of Machu Picchu, the Giza pyramids. But have you ever wondered how it once looked? Way back in the days when they were built? Or even in the time they were covered in ivy and forgotten by humanity? Buckle up, because we're heading on a time travel adventure to the world's greatest archaeological sites. Our voyage begins in South America, deep inside the Peruvian mountains. Behold, the city of Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is a monument to the ingenuity and power of the Inca civilization. During its prime, the Inca civilization stretched 2,500 miles along South America's coastline from modern-day Ecuador all the way down to Chile. And Machu Picchu was located at the heart and center of it. The historic site was constructed at around 7,000 feet above sea level, more or less around 1450 BCE. The gated city consisted of around 150 buildings made of stone. The Incas managed to build temples, houses, and even a complex aqueduct system to irrigate the entire town. And yes, they did all that without the help of wheels or any instrument made of iron. The housing model is somewhat similar to stone houses we see nowadays, with the difference that the Incas didn't use any cement to stick together the blocks of stone. Yet, they fit seamlessly on top of each other. Not only that, the Incas must have developed a rudimentary yet effective anti-earthquake technology, since, in the event of a quake, the rocks would shake without falling out of place. If Machu Picchu had been built today, it would have cost over $70 million to finish the entire thing. The purpose of the site is still a mystery to many historians. Theories suggest that it could have been built as a ceremonial site, a safety base for the Inca people, or even a retreat for royalty. What we know for a fact is that in the 16th century, 100 years after Machu Picchu was built, its population abandoned it, with tree roots taking over the majority of the site and keeping it hidden from humankind for over 4 centuries. It wasn't until the 20th century that the world was reintroduced to Machu Picchu when a Peruvian farmer led Yale University professor Hiram Bingham III to visit the site. Since then, Bingham and many other explorers dedicated their lives and research to studying the archaeological wonder of Machu Picchu. Now, for the next stop on our time-traveling vehicle, the city of Pompeii in Italy. Pompeii has crowded our collective imagination for many years. The eruption of the Mount Vesuvius volcano in 79 AD and the destruction of an entire city is hopefully not something that will happen again. But I bet you're wondering, what did Pompeii look like on its last day? It took 18 hours for Pompeii's streets, markets, houses, and forums to be buried under millions of tons of volcanic ash. Thanks to some clever scientists, we discovered that the lava and ashes that covered Pompeii on its very last day actually helped to freeze the city in time. Different from ice, the cloud of ashes did not preserve the city intact, but as the items disintegrated over 2,000 years, they left voids under the earth. Archaeologists found that if they filled these voids with plaster, the shape of the buried city would soon reveal itself. And that's exactly what happened. Of course, it was nothing like the bustling city of 12,000 people that had existed for many years before the fateful eruption. Pompeii was a vibrant and rich municipality. The site's ruins revealed that many areas of Pompeii boasted impressive houses, some with balconies, which was a sign of great wealth at the time. And, believe it or not, even some artwork survived the eruption. Archaeologists found well-preserved frescoes and murals of mythological creatures, all indicating that members of the high society lived there. Ruins show the city even had thermal baths and showers made with luxurious materials. Oh, and apparently, the people of Pompeii had amazing teeth. Yes, archaeologists could see even that tiny level of detail from the plaster molds they recovered from underground. Still in the Italian territory, we find one of the world's biggest tourist attractions, the Roman Colosseum. It was built as an amphitheater during the reign of Emperor Vespasian, around 70 AD. It wasn't until 80 AD that Vespasian's son, Emperor Titus, inaugurated the Colosseum. The monument was something to behold, with 157-foot-tall walls, over 80 entrances, and the capacity to host 87,000 people. All social classes and groups were welcome at the Colosseum, and this partly explains why it flourished for so many centuries. During the decline of the Roman Empire, around the 6th century AD, the Colosseum started being neglected and abandoned. The monument was looted, and some of its columns and stones were used to build infrastructure elsewhere. Only 1/3 of the original Colosseum still remains, and if it's big now, imagine what it once was. Greece was home to one of the world's largest empires. At the height of this empire, literally and historically speaking, more or less 2,400 years ago, the Greeks built a citadel known as the Acropolis. The Acropolis, which is composed of historical buildings, is considered to be one of the biggest landmarks of Western civilization to date. Tourists that visit the capital city of Athens today may be faced with yellowish and broken pillars of the Parthenon, standing way up high in one of the city's hills. But way back when it was built, between 447 and 432 BCE, the imposing and majestic Parthenon was purely white, as the entire monument was built with gleaming white marble. The statues inside were made of gold. The Parthenon is a 23,000 square foot temple held up by 69 marble columns. The largest blocks of marble are massive, weighing around 10 tons each. And the most surprising fact is that the marble didn't come from Athens, but from a nearby site that stood 10 miles from the Acropolis, known as Mount Pentelicon. Historians intrigued by where the primary material for building the Acropolis came from found tiny and big blocks of marble all scattered around the floor of Mount Pentelicon. There was also a paved road that the Greeks had built to carry the rocks around. But perhaps the most impacting monument of all times is located at the heart of the Middle East, outside the Egyptian city of Cairo. The pyramids are considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Giza Pyramid Complex was built as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago. Between 20 to 30,000 people took part in the construction process. It's composed of 3 pyramids. The massive monument is made out of approximately 8,000 tons of granite and over 550,000 tons of mortar, which gives it the appearance it has today. Would you believe me if I told you that the pyramids didn't always look like this? Far from it. They were shiny white with a golden triangular tip at the top. This is because the Egyptians used over 6 million tons of limestone to cover the entire rocky, step-like structure, all so that they could gleam white under the unforgiving sunlight of Egyptian skies. The Pyramid of Khufu remained the tallest structure on Earth made by humans for over 3,800 years. It was the only 8-sided pyramid in Egypt and was believed to align with Orion's belt. It's considered to be the most aligned construction facing north. In 1979, it was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Let's head on down to the Indian city of Agra to quickly visit the Taj Mahal. You may know it as the Taj, but it can also be called by its more endearing name, a teardrop in the cheek of time. The Taj took over 22 years to build and was commissioned in 1632 by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan as a declaration of love for his third and favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It was made with ivory white marble, and amazingly, due to tight conservation, it still remains very similar to what it was when it was built. I think all this talk of landmarks got me thirsty for some traveling. What about you? Tell us in the comments below if you've ever visited some of these sites, or which interesting landmarks you'd add to this video.
The most exciting accidental discovery I've made in my life was a $10 bill in my old winter jacket. Some folks are luckier though, as they find underground cities from centuries ago or make inventions that turn them into millionaires. Velcro was invented after a routine walk in the woods. Kellogg's Corn Flakes were inspired by a chipped tooth, and Play-Doh saved a business empire from falling by chance. Back in 1998, electrical engineer John Williams found something that looked like an electrical plug sticking out of the ground. He started digging and noticed that it was stuck in a small rock. He found it in a rural location in North America, far from civilization, industrial complexes, airports, factories, and electronic plants. This piece of electronics embedded into a solid granite stone got the nickname Enigmalith and a price tag of $500,000. Some scientists are sure it's a big hoax and not a souvenir left by some visitors from space, as Williams claims. But the finder of the rock wanted to prove that it was a real piece of ancient technology, some sort of an electrical connector. If it's not a hoax, then this little find could be proof that humans, or some other civilization from the past, were way more advanced than we ever thought. They must have managed to invent a way to transmit electricity long before humans in the 19th century. He offered scientists to take a look at this find and establish what it really is without breaking the rock open, but there were no takers. Williams consulted an engineer and a geologist, and both confirmed there were no traces of glue on the electronic component. It hasn't been welded either, so it must be as old as the rock, which is around 100,000 years old, according to geological analysis. Dr. John Kellogg had a philosophy of biological living with regular exercise, massage, plenty of water, zero bad habits, caffeine, and no meat. At the end of the 19th century, he looked over a health institute in Michigan. He once whipped up a mix of flour, oats, and cornmeal. He thought that by baking whole grains at high temps, they'd be easier on the stomach and healthier overall. He baked the mix twice and first made cookies, but a patient chipped a tooth on that version. Then he decided to break it into small pieces. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how Kellogg cornflakes came to be, with so many versions of the story floating around. Kellogg's wife, Ella, and his brother Will both claimed they played a role in creating the flakes, along with several other family members and sanitarium staff. The company lore says that it all went down one night in 1898, when some wheat-based cereal dough was left out too long, fermenting in the process. When rolled out thin, the slightly moldy dough turned into these perfect large thin flakes that got all crispy and yummy in the oven. Over the next few years, Will Kellogg kept tweaking the recipe and realized that corn, not wheat, made even crunchier, tastier flakes. His brand, Kellogg's Corn Flakes, has grown into a multi-billion-dollar company. Swiss engineer George de Mestral once went for a walk with his dog and came back with a concept that would later go to space. Once they got back from the woods, de Mestral noticed that his pants and his dog's fur were covered in the tiny barbs of the cocklebur plant. He examined the burrs under the microscope and noticed that they were shaped like tiny hooks that stuck to loops on clothes and fur. He decided to recreate that natural tech to design an extra strong fastener, one with many practical uses. He was testing different materials for his invention for so many years and finally settled on nylon. He also needed to design a special type of loom that could weave the fibers in the right size, shape, and density. It took de Mestral a total of 14 years until he introduced the world to Velcro, which means velvet and hook in French. De Mestral was hoping his invention would replace the zipper on clothes, but the fashion world found Velcro cheap-looking and unattractive. But NASA didn't think so, and used Velcro for astronaut spacesuits and helmets in the 1960s. Now, Velcro is used everywhere, from footwear to toys to airline seat cushions. Before the middle of the 20th century, most homes were heated with coal. It left soot throughout the house, which was especially visible on wallpapers. Kutal Products was the largest company that sold wallpaper cleaner, but in the 50s, more and more people switched to gas, oil, and electricity, and the sooty buildup problem was mostly solved. The owner of Kutal Products was trying to save his business. Meanwhile, his sister-in-law read that wallpaper cleaner could be used to make holiday decorations. She worked as a nursery school teacher, and modeling clay was pretty hard for her students to handle, so she decided to test this material for molding into different shapes, and it works out just fine. She told her relatives about the discovery and suggested a name for it: Play-Doh. The Kutal company was about to go bankrupt, so it was a great alternative for a new business. Soon enough, Macy's and Marshall Field got interested in the new toy and started selling it. Play-Doh was originally only in one color, white, but soon expanded to red, blue, and yellow. They also made several changes to the original recipe, but the mixture is still mostly the same as when it was used to clean wallpapers. An urban legend says that if you take all the Play-Doh compound ever made and put it through their Fun Factory playset, you'll get a snake that will wrap around the planet 300 times. A man in Turkey was renovating his home when he knocked down a wall in his basement with a sledgehammer. He found a tunnel behind the wall that led to an ancient underground city. The tunnel led to more tunnels and then halls and chambers. It turned out to be a whole underground complex with 18 stories and without a single inhabitant, abandoned a long time ago. It was the city of Daren Kuyu, built thousands of years ago, a home for up to 20,000 people. Whoever built it had great skill, and it's rather easy to build tunnels out of the soft rock, but cave-ins are a big risk. None of the floors at Daren Kuyu have ever collapsed. The city had a complex ventilation system with over 15,000 shafts. The upper levels had the best ventilation and were used for living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels were mainly used for storage, but they also had a dungeon. In between, there were room for domestic animals, a school, a convent, and small churches. John Martin, a forestry professor, was out exploring a forest in Wisconsin one night. He was shining a UV flashlight up into the canopy to spot lichens, fungi, plants, and frogs that glow under the UV light. Then suddenly, he heard a flying squirrel chirping at a bird feeder, pointed the flashlight at it, and saw it light up pink. The professor told his colleagues about it, and they decided to investigate further. They checked out some flying squirrel skins at museums to see if this pink glow is a common thing among them. It turns out that almost all of the flying squirrel specimens they looked at had the same pink fluorescence. Non-flying squirrels didn't glow at all. Other animals with fluorescence, like puffins and chameleons, glow blue under UV light. The only other mammals with fluorescent fur are around 20 species of opossum. They live in different ecosystems and have different diets. The only thing they have in common with flying squirrels is that they're all active at night. And regular squirrels prefer sunlight. There's enough ultraviolet light in low-light conditions, and nocturnal animals need UV vision. So the pink glow might have to do with nighttime perception and navigation, especially in cold and snowy conditions. Or it could be a way for male flying squirrels to attract prospective mates. It could be a sort of mimicry.
Rekat structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure. 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater. But the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the Rekat structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway, the ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing, Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep basins. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. The strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyu Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher.
Tartesos, a mysterious, highly developed society that once flourished and then, without any warning, suddenly disappeared. Moreover, before they were completely gone, they performed some strange rituals, as if they were trying to save themselves from something. But what happened to these people? Let's try to find out. Let's go to the southwest of Spain, to about 2,500 years ago. Once, there was a beautiful city here, a trade center of Tartesos. Imagine the temple in the middle of a deserted town. A breathtaking, monumental two-story building. There's a thick smell of frying meat in the air, and the smoke from its frying rises high into the sky, covering the patterns of the sanctuary. The sun has already set, and it's time to prepare for the ritual. We enter the ancient monumental hall. Inside, hundreds of people gather around a long wooden table lined with delicate ceramics and bronze bowls. They feast and drink. These people have much more fun than the animals outside the building. These animals are being prepared for the ritual. Horses, cows, pigs, donkeys, even dogs. All of them were brought here to appease the deities. And what happens after the ritual itself is even crazier. At the end of the ceremony, people take torches and set fire to the whole building. Everything turns to ashes and coals, and when the last embers fade away, they take shovels and begin to bury this place. It will take them at least several days to bury the former sanctuary under piles of earth. They work tirelessly. In some places, the thickness of the layers of mud and clay will reach almost 14 feet. And then, these people, the last known Tartessians, just leave this place and disappear from our world forever. But what just happened? Why did they even do all this? Let's start from the beginning. Tartesos was first mentioned in Greek and Roman texts thousands of years ago, but for a long time, we had no idea what it even was. All the descriptions were contradictory and confusing. Some archaeologists thought that Tartesos was a kind of seaport. Others thought that it was a river or a water reservoir. They even said this place could be connected with the mystical Atlantis. But there was nothing to back it up with, so the scientific community quickly rejected this idea. But today, we know the truth. Tartesos was an ancient civilization. It's been located on the Iberian Peninsula, one of the southernmost islands of Europe. It flourished in the 9th to 5th centuries BC, and then, around 2,500 years ago, suddenly disappeared. They were quite rich. The island had rich reserves of metal, so their economy was thriving. Silver, copper, lead, and other good things were mined in the local Sierra Morena mountains. Almost all the locals were engaged in trade. For them, it was a common thing. Isn't that strange that there were so few records left about them? And not so many monuments of their culture have survived to this day. In total, throughout Spain, scientists were able to collect around 20 archaeological finds related to Tartesos. 3 of them were excavated in the Guadiana Valley: Cancho Roano, Casas del Turrunuelo, and La Mata. Let's start with the first one. Cancho Roano was discovered in 1978. This find was one of the most significant pieces of the puzzle. This is one of the most beautifully preserved structures of the Tartessian civilization. Not only the walls have survived to this day, but so did the altar, the moat, and even several artifacts. For example, some jewelry and wine glasses. It was a square building surrounded by a deep moat filled with water. And, to be honest, we still don't know its exact purpose. We only assume that it could be an ancient temple. Some rituals were carried out there. For instance, they would set fire to the temple and cover it with thick layers of sand and clay. They even left some expensive artifacts inside, tools, gold jewelry, and so on. Moving on to the next find. Casas del Turrunuelo is one of the best preserved buildings in the entire Western Mediterranean. We only discovered it a couple of years ago, back in 2015. And it hasn't been studied that well yet. But we already know that this place is also pretty weird. Casas del Turrunuelo was a very rich building. It wasn't just some kind of temporary camp. It was a place of monumental, impressive architecture. Massive staircases, vaulted ceilings, luxurious materials brought from all over the Mediterranean, and the latest construction technologies. It was supposed to be a place of power, maybe even something like a palace. And yep, it also became the venue for the rituals. It's unclear whether the locals intended to destroy this beautiful place from the very beginning, but this is where they performed the greatest ritual in the area. This ritual involved more than 50 animals, including the most valuable ones, horses. It was their only means of transportation. The fact that these people gave away their horses may indicate that they planned to stay here for some time. Perhaps they hoped to appease the deities and settle on local lands. The ritual was carried out exactly as they intended. And just like Cancho Ruano, this place was also set on fire. When the ritual ended, the locals buried this place and left, disappearing into the countryside of the Iberian Peninsula. Now it's an abandoned and quiet place. Just like Cancho Ruano, it's been standing here untouched for more than 2,000 years. The last find is La Mata, which was discovered much earlier than the other two, back in 1930. The resemblance between all of them was striking. La Mata had the same fate. It was burned and forgotten for centuries. All of this is very strange and mysterious. It seems like the locals were fleeing from something. Perhaps something happened that made them start building these banquet halls and arranging large-scale rituals. They thought that their deities turned away from them and tried to appease them. But unfortunately, it didn't work. As a result, they were forced to leave their temples and soon disappeared altogether forever. And by the way, why did they disappear at all? Well, this is another mystery of this civilization. One of the most important questions is, did they know that they were going to disappear? Or was it something unexpected? Did they suffer some kind of sudden catastrophe from which they were trying to escape? Or something else? Scientists have several theories on this. The first theory says that there may have been several major earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis in this region. These natural disasters destroyed local settlements and severely demoralized the survivors. Perhaps they were looking for salvation from this. Another theory is that there were some problems with trading. Since they were rich in metal and lived off their economy, any problems in it could lead to big troubles. If they had some kind of mining crisis, then relations between different nations could worsen greatly, and things could get pretty nasty. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The most current theory says that around the 6th century BC, a large-scale tsunami hit the port. This greatly damaged the economy, which worsened the relationship between Tartesos and its neighbors. In any case, this seems to be speculation. This place is like a dream come true for archaeologists. It stores a huge amount of information and secrets that we have yet to unravel. The Tartessians had no idea that by burying their artifacts, they were making a real gift to the scientists of the future. And while scientists continue to study them, we can check out the stuff they have already discovered. History lovers can see Tartessian tools, horse figurines, and decorated ivory in the Archaeological Museum of Badajoz. Let's hope that in the future, scientists will learn more interesting things about this civilization, and we'll finally find out what happened to them.
Now, how about some surreal hidden places to check out? Grab a flashlight and your backpack, and bon voyage! The trip starts in the mountainous country of Switzerland. You travel to the town of Waltensburg in the eastern part of the country. It's raining and it's very cold, but you still make your way to the bottom part of a mountain, where your first adventure awaits. After climbing up high in the mountains, you see a strangely shaped castle. To get there, you must walk up an extremely narrow pathway. Don't look down, you think to yourself. You tighten the straps of your backpack and manage to walk along the pass. Standing at the door of the castle, you really can't believe what you see. A 13th century fortress built entirely of stone. Today, all that is left of Krafenstein Castle is mainly its ruins, but their condition is good enough to get an idea of what the place looked like back in its glory days. You take your time to explore the castle inside, but honestly, this place gives you the chills and you're ready to move on. The next place on the list is Turkey. A plane and then a car ride later, you arrive in the city of Çorum in the northern part of the country. On the outskirts of Çorum, you find a valley filled with old, overgrown mountains and see the beginning of the trail you're about to hike. The way is extremely steep, but it leads to a secret door carved in the mountain. Congratulations! You've just arrived at Kapilikaya. The huge door is a massive arched stone that blocks the entrance to a hidden building. Experts think it has existed since the 2nd century BCE. Unfortunately, the huge door won't open, so what's hidden inside is a mystery today. It's guessed that there is a room inside. Some locals say there's a treasure hidden there too, but until today, no one has managed to enter the place to check. Okay, it's time to get moving before night falls. Next, you get the unique opportunity to travel to Ethiopia. Wandering around the city of Lalibela, you stumble upon a huge pit carved in the ground. You approach it carefully, and soon enough, you see a magnificent terracotta building, so richly detailed it leaves you mesmerized. But that's not all. There are 10 other pits just like this one, hiding King Lalibela's 12th century buildings. All 11 constructions are different from one another, yet share a similar recognizable style. They were hand-carved over the span of 24 years, only with the help of chisels, which is unbelievable given that these buildings are up to 50 feet high. That's about as tall as 5 African elephants stacked on top of each other, if you could do that. This unconventional way of construction made them entirely monolithic, meaning they were carved out of just one gigantic piece of rock. Pretty impressive, huh? Once you leave Ethiopia, you grab a flight to southern Italy, right there on the tip of the boot. No hiking is needed here. Whew! Your friend takes you to a site called Sassi di Matera. It's a Paleolithic city carved in the slope of a steep hill. You might feel like you've traveled in time here, as local stone houses and ancient buildings are unlike anything you've ever seen before. The site, also known as De Sassi, is suspected to be one of the first human settlements in Italy, dating back to over 9,000 years ago. Wandering around the town, you might get invited inside one of the cave-like houses. Oh, and as weird as it may sound, some of the streets run on top of people's homes. Talk about Paleolithic urban planning. You're probably becoming an expert on rock-cut architecture by now, but there are still a few sites left on your list. Next off, you head to Slovenia to visit the world's largest cave castle. This medieval castle was built on top of a 400-foot-high cliff and was designed to be impenetrable. Luckily for you, security is much more relaxed today. Still, if you're looking for a more challenging and less touristy way inside, you can get into the castle through one of its many underground tunnels. They were built over 800 years ago for the owner of the castle. He needed secret passageways to sneak supplies. Today, Pajama Castle is both enchanting and mysterious. I'd say it depends on whether it's a warm sunny day or a cold stormy night. After this medieval experience, you head on to visit Petra, a magnificent Jordanian monument found in the middle of the desert. To get around here, you'll need a large supply of water and sunscreen because it's going to get hot. But this site is worth it. The city of Petra is a marvel of the ancient world. Back in the 4th century BCE, this region was a trading hub at the crossroads of commercial routes. Petra was a wealthy city, home to the Nabateans, an Arab Bedouin tribe that thrived in the region for many years. The rock-carved gate-like structure Petra is famous for is called the Pharaoh's Treasure. It stands at the main entrance to the site and is said to have a treasure hidden inside. You might feel tempted to check it out for yourself, but that's an adventure for another trip. For now, you hop on another plane ride, this time to the Americas. First, you visit the USA, more specifically, the mountainous state of Colorado. You make your way to Mesa Verde National Park. There, in between the greenery and abundant vegetation, you'll find over 600 dwellings built in the cave beneath the cliff, carved deep into the mountainside. This ancient village is now considered a heritage site. The local Puebloan tribe built it back in the 1190s. One of its main buildings is called the Cliff Palace. It's a multi-story construction built from sandstone and mud mortar. The palace alone housed over 150 rooms. If you're feeling sporty, you might want to visit the balcony house. To get there, you'll have to climb a 32-foot ladder. You'll get to see a mid-sized village of 38 rooms, including 2 kivas. Those are traditional chambers that were built by the Puebloans for ceremonial purposes. Still, in the U.S., you make your way to the hills of South Dakota. You're there to visit one of the world's most impressive human-made sculptures on Mount Rushmore. What's so mysterious about this place, you might ask? Well, during Mount Rushmore's construction, a 70-foot-long secret tunnel was built behind the head of Abraham Lincoln. The tunnel was supposed to hold all the documents and artifacts important to the United States history. After the designers thought it through, they decided it was better to hide them in a safe box in the floor of the tunnel. The box holds the history of how Mount Rushmore came to be carved, as well as a brief history of the U.S. and the 4 presidents depicted on the mountain. Amazing, right? Now, you're headed down to Machu Picchu, a South American site hidden between the Peruvian mountains. Machu Picchu itself is already a mystery. Researchers still don't know why or even how the ancient Incan civilization managed to engineer the stone-built citadel all the way back in 1450 CE. To get there, you must endure a 3-day hike, reaching the impressive altitude of 8,000 feet above sea level. Or you can get a train, but that's no fun, right? You're here to check on a relatively new discovery. Back in 2010, French engineer David Crespi was taking measurements of the Inca ruins when he noticed a door he had never seen before. It was sealed off by stones. He went back to the site a few months later with an electromagnetic scanner. The scanner, which could detect objects behind walls, showed there were copious quantities of metals behind that sealed door. The researcher contacted the Peruvian authorities requesting to remove the rocks, but they didn't authorize it. As of today, the door is still locked. Whew, this trip was long, wasn't it? Make sure to get some rest, Indiana Jones. Imagine you decided to take a road trip the old-fashioned way. And by that I mean you decide to do it without the help of any technology. What? So you go to the nearest convenience store and buy a map of each state you plan to pass through. You buckle them up on the passenger seat right next to you and set off on your adventure. During your first week, you arrive in the state of New York. You wave bye-bye to Lady Liberty, eat a slice of pizza, and head upstate. Near the Catskills, you notice you're running low on gas and decide to stop in the nearest town to fill up your tank. You check your map, and it appears that the nearest place is a small village called Aglo, right at the next intersection. You drive a few minutes and pass through a sign that says, "Welcome to Aglo, home of the Aglo General Store." Well, this must be it, you think to yourself. But the town is strangely empty. You can't find the store or the gas station you were looking for. There are no houses. You start to think there might be a mistake. Aglo doesn't seem to exist. This story may sound made up, but it could have actually happened to anyone passing through New York a few years ago. Actually, the so-called town of Aglo is what is called a phantom settlement or a paper town. There are several of these around the world, but Aglo is probably the most famous. Paper towns are basically fake towns. That is, they don't really exist. They're made up of Easter eggs put there by map makers as a kind of copyright trap. Maps are tough to make. To create a map from scratch, one has to do years of fieldwork or analysis of satellite photos. That's why plagiarism has always been rampant among map makers. It's pretty easy to redraw the same geographical features from one map onto a new map, and it is hard to get caught. People are, after all, drawing the exact same world. That's why map makers came up with a way to catch individuals stealing their data. Some map makers may include a mountain that is bigger than they are in reality. Others might add a slight turn on a road, where in reality there is none. For example, in the early 1970s, a fake mountain peak appeared on some Boulder County maps. The addition of this previously unknown peak, called Mount Richard, into local maps began to confuse Colorado rock climbers at the time. It turned out that Mount Richard was one of these copyright traps, put there by a local mapsman called Richard Ciacci. Let's just say he must have decided to pay a tribute to himself with this little addition. Now, adding a paper town is perhaps one of the most extreme solutions, one that mapmakers hope goes unnoticed. But that's not what usually happens, which leads us back to the Aglo story. Mapmakers Ernest Alpertz and Otto Lindbergh from the CDG, General Drafting Corporation, were part of the largest map publishers of the 1930s. Back then, the company was commissioned to create a map of the state of New York. That's when the two men had an idea. In order to prevent copyright infringement, they would create a phantom settlement combining parts of their names together. They came up with the strange name Aglo and added the fake town along Route 206 near the water reservoir of Catskills in upstate New York. The area was supposed to be, in reality, a dirt road. Years later, Rand McNally, another map designing company, produced a map of New York that included a town called Aglo in the same location where CDG had originally placed it. Lindbergh was convinced that he had a copyright case against his competitor, but the story just kept getting more complicated. Both companies went to settle the case in court, but as it turned out, McNally had a legitimate reason for adding Aglo to their version of a New York map. You see, in order to fabricate their maps, McNally did a thorough research on real estate and establishments located in each existing town. And as it turned out, Aglo was not an empty town when they drew their map. Records show that the town housed an establishment named Aglo General Store. Sure, it was the only building in town, but that was enough for the mapmakers to believe that such a town really existed. They added Aglo to the map like they would add any other town with physical establishments. It seemed they weren't infringing any copyright if this once phantom settlement had somehow come to life. The plot twist is that CDG's Alpers and Lindbergh could never have foreseen that someone would decide to occupy a made-up town. But it happened. One day, someone bought a map from a regional gas station that had Aglo marked on it. The person wanted to open a store more or less where Aglo existed, so they decided to name the store after the town it was in. They trusted the accuracy of the map they bought and named their business Aglo General Store. After all, why would there be a non-existent town on an official map? The general store didn't last many years, only enough to turn this story into a mess. On the bright side, this whole debacle turned Aglo into a super famous fictitious settlement. It became a tourist spot, with people driving from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's welcome sign. Now, as we said before, paper towns are plenty around the world and over time, too. A 2005 BBC documentary revealed that the City of London alone had over 100 tiny fake streets or paper streets around the city. For instance, the so-called Moat Lane is supposedly a curving road in Finchley, North London. But if you ever decide to go visit, you'll find nothing but trees and gardens. And what about Argleton, a town in the north of England? Or, more accurately, an empty field in northeastern England? Argleton existed for a while on Google Maps. There were hotel listings and apartments for rent in town. Well, the only thing is that they weren't really in Argleton, but rather in nearby settlements. It's believed that Google Maps imported these fake streets into its database, as they used renowned copyrighted atlases as their sources. But as the truth about these paper streets surfaced, the company later deleted them. If we turn back the clock a few hundred years, we'll find another mystery story involving a possible phantom settlement. But this isn't a tiny town at an intersection, but rather an entire island. Bermejo Island was speculated to be a tiny inhabited island. It appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries and was a hot spot for Spanish explorers. Its location sometimes varied slightly from map to map, and occasionally its name appeared as Vermija, but its existence seems certain enough. It wasn't until the 18th century that the island stopped being depicted in maps altogether. This island's last appearance dates back to a 1921 edition of a Mexican atlas, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. The case of Mexico's disappeared island has raised many questions. Did it sink? Was it destroyed? Are people simply looking for it in the wrong place? 3 official investigations took place in 2009 to locate the island. They used high-end technologies, scouring Mexico's oceans and seabeds. Yet, Bermeja remained nowhere to be found. One can't help but wonder if the island ever existed at all. Similar to modern-day mapmakers, 16th and 17th century mapmakers had their way to trick map users. Instead of copyright traps, these fake towns or even fake islands served as a way to fool and confuse enemies and unwanted voyagers. Since a long time has gone by, it's hard to know whether Bermeja was just another phantom settlement. It stopped being depicted on maps, but this mysterious case still leaves people baffled and confused.
Behind those huge steel doors is one of the most guarded places on Earth. It's known as Site R, or the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. You'll find it in Pennsylvania. The construction is 60 stories underground and is said to be a safe place for people in case of a natural or human-made disaster. There's not a lot of information online about this mysterious place, but what we do know is that it's equipped with 38 communication systems. It's obviously not available for visits via Google Earth, but you can catch a quick glance at the 2 gates that face the complex. Vatican City is one of the most famous enclaves on Earth, and it's certainly worth a visit due to its wonderful architecture and vast list of art pieces to check out. One place, however, will always be off limits for visitors: the Vatican's secret archives. They have some of the oldest and rarest books on Earth. These archives are available only to a limited number of people, and since they have been visited by a small number of people so far, they also trigger a lot of weird theories. For example, that there may be books proving there's life outside our planet. If you're fascinated by shipwrecks, you'll be interested to know that one of the largest wrecks you can see on Google Earth is on North Sentinel Island, India. It used to be called the SS Jasim. It was a Bolivian ferry that sank in the area back in 2003. The reason why people can't visit it physically isn't because of the ship itself, but because the island is home to the world's most dangerous tribe. We don't really know how many people live there, but it was estimated that between 50 to 400 people call this place home. And they really don't like tourists. No person that tried to reach them survived. Also, to protect them, their privacy, and their special status, the island is closely monitored by the Indian authorities. That's mostly because it's believed the locals don't have any immunity to modern diseases. So being in contact with foreigners might be dangerous for the tribe's people, since they've never seen the outer world. A huge pink bunny appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the Italian Coleto Fava Mountains back in 2005. Besides the locals, some people stumbled upon it online too. They were puzzled by the discovery. Unfortunately, that 200-foot-tall bunny is completely gone today. You can still find the images of it online though. The unusual object was designed by artists from Vienna. They encouraged tourists to climb, jump, or even take a nap on top of the large rabbit. The whole purpose of the project was to allow people to experience what it would be like to live as smaller creatures. The bunny didn't have any removal date at the time it was placed there and was expected to last at least until 2025. But Mother Nature had other plans. A Japanese artist decided to move back to her little home village named Nagoro. But she soon found out that most of her neighbors were moving to bigger cities. To deal with loneliness, she started putting together scarecrow-like dolls, or kakashi, and placing them all over her garden. She didn't stop there though. The artist soon began doing the same with many other places in her village, creating dolls and placing them as if they were taking part in various human activities. These dolls keep moving around too, but the woman likes to stay true to her story and insists she doesn't touch them. You can see the images of this quirky village on Google Maps. This weird portal was discovered via online maps in New Baltimore, New York. It gave people all sorts of bad dreams. With spooky-looking buildings and all sorts of blurry figures, this area soon became a source for many weird internet theories. Turns out it was nothing more than a technical issue, which resulted in those images being rendered in a distorted manner. Either way, if you look for these images on Google, you won't be able to unsee them. This cute miniature world map was created by an artist from Denmark. He continuously worked on this tedious project from 1944 until 1967, using mostly his hands and just a few tools for moving heavy rocks around. He gathered stones at the edge of the water, then recreated the map of the world on the surface of this lake. During the winter, he was able to use a sled to transport larger pieces of rock over the ice and then place them in the perfect position. Apart from the continents themselves, the map also features rivers and lakes, as well as some other famous landmarks. Care to have a look at a sea without any coasts? Search for the Sargasso Sea. You'll find it in the northern Atlantic Ocean. This weird sea is surrounded by 4 ocean currents and no dry land at all. It got its name from the seaweed that grows there, sargassum. Fingerprints on the lens of a satellite camera? You may be tricked into thinking this if you search for the Finger Maze. It's located in the city of Brighton, UK, and is a large fingerprint created in Hove Park. It also has a maze at the center. It can be really hard and time-consuming to look for wild animals on Google Earth, but the Geo browser does have a nice feature that can help if you're eager to see hippos and flamingos in their natural habitat. Try Googling animals from above and start scrolling through these images. This unique feature can take you from Kenya to Namibia and even all the way to Antarctica, where you can see emperor penguins. There are some places on Google Maps that, for specific reasons, aren't available for the online public, like the Royal Palace in Amsterdam. If you head over there via Google Earth, you'll see that everything around the Dutch Royal Palace is still visible, like the vegetation and roads, but the construction itself is blurred from all angles. That's probably because local authorities want to keep the unique views of the palace for the eyes of physical visitors only. The same goes for the Tantaco National Park in Chile. This one is a privately owned nature reserve that can only be seen on Google Maps from a distance. Once you reach a certain point, the zoom feature stops working. Some people say that since it's a nature preserve, it may be home to some endangered species, and extreme measures are taken for their protection. You know how a certain brand of fried chicken has a certain kernel on their logo? Yeah, you won't see any of these logos in high resolution on Google Maps. That's because the online map uses specific algorithms to detect people's faces and blur them out. As you can see, it's not always really that accurate. It's called Snake Island, and the Brazilian authorities prohibit people from visiting it. For good reason. You'll find the island near the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. It's said to be home to over 4,000 snakes. Some of the most venomous types of reptiles on Earth call this place home. If that's not creepy enough, how about that some of them are so dangerous that a small drop of their venom can permanently damage the human skin? You can see the shape of the island on Google Earth, but the more you zoom in, the blurrier it becomes. Here's another cool thing you can do on Google Earth. Time travel. Well, at least sort of. You won't be able to travel back in time and tell yourself to study more for that tricky exam, but you can see certain historical images of places you like. You can check if this feature works by looking at the upper left corner of the screen. If you can see a small icon with a clock, it may allow you to scroll some years back, but you can also see how sunlight affects Earth if you turn on the sunlight feature.
Have you ever wondered how cool buildings of the future are going to look? Well, hold on tight because artificial intelligence is here to revolutionize the world of architecture. AI is a great sidekick. It can give the architects incredible new tools to create mind-blowing structures that are not only stunning, but also eco-friendly and super efficient. So let's check what our beautiful future might look like. First of all, you know how cities can get crazy busy and overwhelming, right? Well, guess what? AI is here to save the day and make our cities super smart. Imagine you're cruising down the road in your flying car. Yes, we'll have those. Thanks to AI, the traffic flows like a dream. No more endless gridlock. The city knows where the most likely crime spots are and takes proactive steps to keep us safe. It's like having superheroes on every corner. And hey, forget about trash piling up. AI makes sure waste is managed efficiently, keeping our city clean and fresh. They can act as a city manager who can optimize everything from traffic to safety and even waste disposal. They can analyze tons of data from all sorts of places like sensors and social media. With all that information, they can help city planners make brilliant decisions that make our lives better. Okay, so you stroll down the street, and your eyes are instantly captivated by an extraordinary building. Its futuristic curves and features make it stand out from the rest. And it not only catches your eye, but also gives Mother Nature a high five. You might think it was designed by a genius architect, but little do you know it was actually a collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence. Imagine having a super smart design buddy who can whip up thousands of incredible building ideas in a blink of an eye. That's what AI-assisted design software does for architects. It can generate and assess a ton of design options. They take into account stuff like the best materials to use and the perfect placement for the building. Also, by analyzing data and crunching numbers, algorithms can help optimize the building's design. They can ensure it minimizes energy usage, conserves water, and manages waste like a pro. Every building strives to reduce costs, save energy, and promote a better world. The result? Architectural masterpieces that are both jaw-droppingly beautiful and super practical. The cityscape of the future will be dotted with these awe-inspiring structures. Oh, but that wasn't impressive enough for you? Well, how about a stunning, futuristic building that seems to defy gravity? It's not made of traditional bricks and mortar, oh no. This marvel was created using the powers of 3D printing. With the help of AI, architects designed every intricate detail and fed all the important data, like what materials to use and how the site conditions might affect the structure. AI algorithms worked their magic to optimize the design, making it both breathtakingly beautiful and rock solid. 3D printing is basically like having a magical machine that can create awesome structures straight out of a sci-fi movie, and AI jumps in to make sure these structures are not just pretty, but also strong. In the city of the future, 3D printing will become the ultimate architect's tool. It will allow them to create structures that were once impossible to build. From mind-bending shapes to intricate details, the possibilities are endless. But AI isn't just making buildings look great, it also makes them efficient and cozy. Let's say you step into a futuristic office building, and voila! The lights automatically adjust to match your mood, and the temperature is set perfectly for you. These futuristic buildings are capable of sensing and responding to their surroundings, just like you do. They control the lighting, keeping it just right for the time of day. They manage the temperature, so it's always cozy and comfortable. They even keep a watchful eye on security and fix small issues before they become big headaches. So, the smart building knows when people come and go, so it optimizes energy usage accordingly, saving the planet and some cash along the way. Now the cool thing is, all these aren't the only possibilities. How about turning skyscrapers into a vertical forest? Recently, an architect from India got super excited about the power of artificial intelligence. So, he decided to team up with an image bot called Midjourney to create a vision for the future. But instead of a dull, robotic world, they aimed for something spectacular. With text prompts like utopian technology and futuristic towers, the architect and AI got to work. Guess what? Midjourney didn't disappoint. It conjured up a world where buildings were covered in lush vertical forests and adorned with shapes inspired by nature. They wanted to create a sustainable future that harmonized with the environment. The architect, Manas Bhatia, is super positive about AI's potential. He doesn't see it as a threat to his job, but as a powerful tool for positive change. He envisions a future where architects and AI collaborate to make breathtaking designs. In his project, Bhatia even asked the AI to imagine symbiotic and hollowed structures, and it responded with pictures of apartments nestled within hollowed-out trees. Imagine a world where the building itself becomes a living, breathing part of nature. Well, Bhatia believes that nature should play a big role in architecture. He loves designing structures that embrace nature's beauty and functionality. From buildings built around trees to facades that regulate temperature, he's all about blending architecture with the natural world. With architects like Bhatia and the superpowers of AI, the future of cities is going to be amazing. So get ready to step into a world where nature and technology coexist in perfect harmony. It's a dream we can't wait to see come true. Or if you're not a big fan of trees, how about this? Skyscrapers that aren't made of solid bricks, but instead, they're inflatable wonders. Zumo, an architectural practice in Barcelona, used the magic of AI to bring these wobbly structures to life. These inflatable superstructures rise above future cities like illuminated balloons in the sky. Here's the best part. These inflatable buildings have sustainability superpowers. You can pump them up to towering heights, flatten them for easy transportation, and rebuild them wherever they're needed. Plus, they're powered by renewable energy, reducing their impact on the environment. Pretty cool, right? Phew, the future is zooming toward us like a rocket. Artificial intelligence can become the secret sauce that makes architects' work extra special. But hey, with great power comes great responsibility. We need to use AI wisely and ethically. For now, we don't have to worry about machines replacing architects. Artificial intelligence still needs a human hand, or else we might end up with buildings that look like mashed up bananas or ice cream cones, unless that's your thing. In addition, humans have one important advantage. They, well, are humans. We need to keep in mind that artificial intelligence doesn't have emotional intelligence. It's a brainy genius, but it can't fully understand the feelings and vibes we humans crave in our spaces. So, we must remember to infuse our designs with that human touch, those warm and fuzzy elements that make us go, "Ah, I feel right at home." And let's not forget that AI is still learning. It's basically just taking its first steps, and we need to be patient and give it time to grow. Rushing things too quickly could lead to wonky designs or buildings that look like a jumbled puzzle. This might look cool if you like avant-garde architecture, but for regular folk, no thanks. So, as the future unfolds at warp speed, let's embrace the wonders of AI in architecture. But let's also remember to balance its brilliance with our own human touch. Together, we can create a future where buildings are not just functional, but also filled with heart and soul. It's an adventure that's out of this.
It was April 10th, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14th, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure, but it's somewhere around 7 miles deep and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
Welcome to Gnome, a small town located in the south of Seward Peninsula on the west coast of Alaska. If you live here, I'll bet you say there's no place like Gnome. Well, maybe not. It's cold and snowy here, and no roads connect this town with other settlements. And with the onset of night, locals have disappeared here without a trace. Perhaps that's why only 3,500 people live here. Well, let's investigate this case. People disappear in cities for assorted reasons, but it was Gnome who attracted the attention of the public. From 1960 to 2004, some 24 people went missing there. That number is statistically too big for such a small population. People just didn't come home in the morning, and no one knew what had happened to them. All the locals in small towns like Gnome know each other. There are almost no strangers here, as it's difficult to get to Gnome. There are no roads and no ferry crossing. All roads from Gnome break off and lead to beautiful natural landscapes unspoiled by human mammals. You can get there and back by plane. And this is not some passenger jet, but a small biplane. Another way to get there is by snowmobile. By the way, Gnome is the ultimate point of the famous dog sled race, the Iditarod. Also, you can pay locals from neighboring villages and towns to bring you to Gnome by motorboat. But despite this, the town has become quite famous. The frequent disappearance of people finally got needed attention. The whole world found out about Gnome, and in 2009, Hollywood even made a movie about it. For a long time, no one could solve the mystery. The police had no clues, no witnesses, nothing. There are long, cold nights here in winter, and the air becomes so cold that a glass of water freezes in minutes. Snow can fall constantly. Therefore, if someone leaves the town at night, snow will sweep all traces away by the morning. Of course, people began to come up with their own theories. The most popular one was about someone who took people away by force. The police didn't find any evidence that some person could do it. So, if it's not a human, it could be some beast. And again, police found no evidence to support this version. After that, people started thinking that creatures from other planets caused these disappearances. Many locals were sure that the town was a popular destination for extraterrestrial spaceships. The plot of the Hollywood movie The Fourth Kind was based on this version. More time passed. Finally, the police and the FBI launched a large-scale investigation, and they uncovered the truth. They realized that the stories about missing people were exaggerated. The popularity of Gnome and the constant talk about fantastic things made people believe in the reality of these versions. Now, let's assume that some of the appearances were made up. But still, many people are gone. What about them? The answer is bars and harsh weather. Entertainment venues are open at night. Some locals have fun, leave the bar, and go home. At this moment, a heavy snowstorm begins. Visibility drops to zero, and the strong wind knocks you down. This way, a person might simply get lost. And that's it. The truth turned out stranger than most versions. The Bermuda Triangle is a big area in the Atlantic Ocean, so the disappearance of ships and planes there seems not so surprising. But it's much creepier when it happens on a lake. Let's visit the Lake Michigan Triangle. It's located between Michigan and Wisconsin. For a couple of centuries, terrible things have been happening here. People put the same legends around this place as around the Bermuda Triangle. They reported unexplained phenomena and saw flying objects above the lake's surface. Some believe that the triangle is a time portal. Of course, no theories have been confirmed, but strange cases have occurred on the triangle territory. One happened in 1950, when a Northwest Airlines plane with 108 passengers disappeared without a trace during a flight over the lake. Police officers saw a red light over the lake 2 hours after the plane's last communication. The aircraft probably crashed, but rescuers didn't find any passengers or wreckage. All that's left was just an oil stain on the water. Many ships and boats disappeared there, but one of the strangest cases occurred on April 28, 1937. It was midnight. One ship was sailing through this lake. Captain George Donner went to sleep in his cabin after a hard day's work. 3 hours later, the vessel was approaching the port. One of the crew members went to the captain's cabin to wake him up. The door was locked from the inside. The assistant knocked, but no one answered. When he suspected that something had happened to the captain, the assistant unlocked the door. He got into the cabin, but there was no captain there. He seemed to have disappeared into thin air. The crew couldn't find him. Since then, the eerie disappearance of Captain George Donner remains unexplained. Meet David Paulides. In 2008, he finished his career as a police officer and began to study the mysterious disappearance of people in Europe, the USA, and Canada. He found out that most people went missing in the U.S. national parks. Over the past 150 years, more than 1,100 tourists have vanished there. Many of them were experienced travelers who knew how to survive in harsh wild conditions. David has written about these mysterious vanishings. He pointed out that some of them didn't disappear, but were found alive. They woke up somewhere in the forest and didn't remember what had happened to them. The creepy detail of all these cases is that most missing persons were young. Another detail is that many went missing before hurricanes. There are too many riddles and not enough answers in this case. Then there's the Sargasso Sea in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. This is the only sea that doesn't have shores on land. It's called the sea only because it's defined by ocean currents. Also, golden brown algae grow in this area's bottom, making it seem like an orange spot in the middle of the endless ocean. The Sargasso Sea became famous because, in the 19th century, one of the most famous phantom ships in history sailed here. In 1872, a brigantine sailed through the Sargasso Sea. Its captain spotted another ship a few miles away. He lit a signal fire, but received no response. Then the captain decided to sail closer to find out what had happened. On the hull of the mysterious ship was the name Mary Celeste. The captain of the brigantine and several crew members went on board. They walked around the deck and looked into the cabins and the hold. Everything was in place, but there were no people. The cargo and barrels remained untouched, so pirates didn't attack the vessel. The only damaged thing on the ship were the sails. They were torn to shreds. All documents except the logbook were missing from the navigator's cabin. The last logbook entry was added on November 24, 1872. The crew of the ship was never found, and this was one of many cases. In the 20th century, from the 60s to the 80s, there were many reports of empty boats and yachts floating on the sea. Also, some entire ships disappeared without a trace. All these cases still remain a mystery. According to one version, the four-sided current forms water funnels. Whirlpools can quickly pull a ship into the depths of the sea. This explains the disappearance of boats. But what about cases when the vessel is still on the water without a crew? Sometimes these whirlpools can create wind vortices. They're like little tornadoes. What if these whirlwinds are powerful enough to throw people overboard and tear the sails? Yeah, the theory seems too fantastic. So, what do you think happened? Well, looky here. It's New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. Hong Kong on the Hudson, the greatest city in the world. New York, New York, the city so nice they named it twice. Alright, I'll stop. You thought you knew this city so well, but underneath all that glitz and glamour is a facade, literally. New York is populated with some of the most iconic urban buildings in the world and home to some of the most unique and famous towers. Who would have known that New York was a front for fake buildings? And the cool thing is that there are plenty to search for. Okay, I'm adding that to my bucket list. So the question is, why do they put these fake buildings all over New York? The city is one of the most vibrant places in the world and requires many infrastructures to keep the city in motion. That means having many industrial structures and buildings in every major district. New York is charming for the design and the buildings. Imagine having industrial structures right next to your favorite pizza parlor or hot dog stand. The designers thought ahead and decided to disguise those industrial infrastructures as fake buildings. They blend with the city so well that they don't stand out. They look like your good old apartment or housing unit with a front door, real-life windows, and even charming balconies where people would hang out. The only thing is that there's nothing behind the facade and no one is allowed inside. So, where in the world can you find these fake buildings? For starters, one of the most popular fake buildings is in Brooklyn. At 58 Joralemon Street, you can find a very typical neighborhood. But between the buildings stands a brick building with a slightly deeper shade than the rest. It has bright open windows that blend in with the rest of the buildings in the neighborhood, except that they're blacked out. At first glance, you might not think of it as anything, but if you pay close attention, the building looks like a glitch from a video game. It was built in 1847, way before New York was considered glamorous. Originally, it was meant to be a regular building, but in 1908, they converted it into a fake building. Don't think you can just try to break in. Even if you could, it's pointless, because it's part of a ventilation fan for the subway. It also serves as an emergency exit for some of the surrounding buildings. Actually, throughout New York, many fake buildings exist to disguise the subway vents for the smoke to escape. All the way to 415 Bruckner Boulevard, the Bronx, this townhouse was designed by the Switzer Group, which is an interior architect company. It's not as charming as the one at 58 Joralemon Street, but it serves a similar purpose: to hide an electric substation for New York's utility company. The city needs these substations to reduce the high-voltage electricity to a lower voltage so it can be distributed locally. Having a building like this popping out of the middle of your neighborhood isn't exactly the smartest way to attract people to the Bronx. That's why the fake townhouse facade is the perfect camouflage. Now, some of these fake buildings don't really hit the mark and stick out like a sore thumb. The people of Manhattan describe the Mulberry Square infrastructure as a complete clunker. After plenty of redesigns and back to the drawing board meetings, the result is still not pretty. The locals compare it to a concrete box. They created windows without glass, which doesn't allow the building to blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. But it beats a typical subway ventilation plant either way. There are just so many places to visit and cross off your bucket list. But if you live in China, you can literally stay in the country and visit many iconic cities around the world. The replica cities began when the Chinese economy started booming in the early 90s. They wanted the lifestyle of the rich and famous without wanting to leave their country. They can be comfortable eating their local food and get the feeling of being abroad. The Chinese province of Guangdong has an identical copy of the historical Australian alpine village Hallstatt. The real Hallstatt is centuries old and one of the most charming places to discover. The local people of Hallstatt also had no idea that their home was being built in China. Some people thought that this was controversial, probably because it cost around $940 million to build it. Paris is undoubtedly one of the most charming cities you could ever visit. Its rich history and vibrant culture are enough to catch the first plane to go there. For residents of Tianducheng, that's something they can do anytime they want. The city is also known as Sky City and has a replica of the Eiffel Tower that looks eerily like the iconic one in Paris and built buildings to match the city's visual charm. One of the main things that will break the charm is the farmland surrounding the city. There's barely anyone there, and the streets are always empty, very un-Paris-like. Still, you can find some nice fountains and statues scattered along the streets to give it some spirit. There's laundry hung everywhere, even on the trees. The picturesque fountains are dry and many apartments are empty. Only a few stores are open for business. Even though this looks like a fake city, it's quite real. Some people live here because it's more affordable than other places. 2 hours away from this town is another version of Paris's Pont Alexandre III and a carbon copy of London's Tower Bridge, but with 4 towers instead of 2. Hey, such a bargain! You can also visit the closest thing to Italy, but this time you can go shopping. Florentia Village is an outlet mall that offers an array of shops to lose yourself. The good thing is that this was built by an Italian developer to capture the essence of an Italian village. It has fountains, canals, and mosaics for proper aesthetics. It began in 2011 and has more than 200 shops with many Italian brands and British, US, and Chinese brands as well. The place is so popular that it gets between 10,000 and 25,000 visitors per day. China also has other replica towns that put you in a mini Manhattan called the Yujiapu Financial District. The developer's goal was to make this place the financial center of the world. It was complete with the right landmarks, like the Rockefeller and Lincoln Centers, but the project was halted in 2019, leaving it mainly empty. You can find a typical English town with cobbled streets, Victorian homes, and restaurants that make Thames Town. This place was meant to recreate a European lifestyle fantasy without leaving Shanghai. China also has a Dutch town that has some elements of Amsterdam with windmills and famous canals. They even decided to copy some of the landmarks, like the Netherlands Maritime Museum. Here's a bonus story of Lebanon's thinnest building built out of a dispute. It's the story of two brothers who both inherited unequal plots of land. One of the brothers happened to get a very thin plot of land and couldn't help but be jealous of his brother's nice plot of land. He wasn't pleased. Both of the lands overlooked the Mediterranean Sea in a lively neighborhood of Beirut. So it's no wonder that both brothers couldn't agree on how they should develop their lands. It was obvious that the brother with the most land could build a proper building. The other brother had to improvise. He decided to obstruct his brother's property by constructing a thin building enough to only fit 14 feet at its widest and 2 feet at its most narrow. It was constructed in 1954, and the locals of the area know it as the Grudge. The crazy thing is that the place was once habitable with many visitors enjoying their stay. It's not easy to live there, but it's part of living the experience. The building is still standing, but is empty.
Researchers have found almost 1,000 previously hidden Maya settlements in the tropical lowlands of what is now northern Guatemala. They did it with LiDAR, light detection and ranging lasers, which they used to scan areas from the air. The region we're talking about is pretty vast. All those structures and buildings they saw over there stretch across about 650 square miles. And these spots were supposedly occupied thousands of years ago. It seems all these structures were pretty densely packed, so people lived close to each other. They had at least 417 ancient villages, towns, and cities where they could identify boundaries. These structures and buildings were actually a part of a state that looked like a kingdom. Some of these settlements were built as sports courts, civic, ceremonial, and religious centers, and residential homes. There were also massive palaces, platforms, dams, pyramids, and causeways across that area. People who lived there also had reservoirs where they collected water. So, they needed the power to organize thousands of specialists and workers. And they also needed many skilled people to build such structures without the technologies we have today. They needed lime producers, architects, mortar and quarry specialists, lithic technicians, those who took care of legal enforcement, and other important roles to establish the true community. This cool laser scanning system researchers used while exploring this area can even penetrate very dense ecosystems and vegetation. The light bounces off different surfaces and then creates a digitally reconstructed map. This map is based on how much time it takes for the pulses to get back to a receiver. So, with this laser system, they discovered they were also lowlands for agriculture. So why exactly did the Maya settle in this region? It was a specific area. Plus, it was hard to build such an amazing kingdom in a tropical rainforest climate. Back in the old times, ancient peoples had mostly inhabited areas in drier climates. Over there, they would build water resources, which were some sort of the basis of society and a source of life. An example of this is Teotihuacan of Highland Mexico, although they did have a couple of navigable rivers they could use for transport and trade. But these rainforest areas had their advantages too. The Maya used natural resources like limestone, which was their primary building material, salt, and the volcanic rock obsidian, which they used for different tools. Also, they managed to find enough dry land to live and build homes there. The lowlands were seasonal swamps called bajos, and they were perfect for agriculture because of the fertile soil. Generally, the Maya built settlements that could endure rainy periods too. They were ready for different circumstances, including flood and drought, which is something you could see in how they built houses. Their architecture was also one piece of evidence that showed their community was like a centralized kingdom-like state, which shows they stuck together through tough times. The Mayan Empire was very powerful, and it reached its peak about the 6th century CE. They were excellent at pottery, agriculture, writing, mathematics, and calendars. They were the ones who created complex calendar systems, such as the calendar round, which is based on 365 days. Although some believed the Mayan calendar predicted December 21st, 2012 would be the end of the world, it was just a coincidence with the end of a certain full cycle. They would call it the long count calendar, and it lasts 5,125 years. The Mayan people left behind an impressive amount of astonishing architecture and symbolic artwork. Most of their stone cities ended up abandoned by 900 CE. No one still knows why the Mayan civilization in that area collapsed, although there are some theories. Some think that by the 9th century, these people had exhausted the resources around them to the point that they could no longer feed and sustain such a big population. Others believe some city-states didn't get along that well, so they broke down the traditional system of power they used to have. Some say it was all because of a very long period of drought. It could be a combination of all these factors, though. But one Mayan city, located on an island, even survived until the 17th century. It was long after the rest of the Mayan civilizations had been destroyed or abandoned. If you're a traveler, you might know the town by its modern name, Flores. Scientists believe about 2,000 people lived there. The earliest Maya people were farmers. They cultivated crops like beans, squash, corn, and cassava. As they had many interesting ingredients, they created hundreds of cool recipes. Many of those are still present even today. For example, in modern Mexican cooking. And especially popular are papayas, cacao, avocados, squash, pineapples, chili peppers, beans, and so on. Even though the Maya mostly practiced a kind of primitive type of slash-and-burn agriculture, there is also evidence of them using some more advanced farming methods, like terracing and irrigation. And they were big chocolate lovers. More than 3,500 years ago, the Olmecs of Mesoamerica probably turned out to be the first to realize that it takes some work for us to get such a cool thing as chocolate. But the Maya were the ones who turned it into a true form of art. Scientists found out about it when they found cacao in Mayan pottery. Their chocolate would be mixed with honey, water, cornmeal, and chili peppers. That's how you get a spicy, savory, hot chocolate beverage you can try even today in Mexico and Central America. Also, they used written language in their books. Their paper was made from fig tree bark, and using strips of that paper, they created a large library of books. Books made of this material are called codices, and 4 of these can still be found today. Sadly, many books were lost over time because of the humid climate or some human factors. The classic Maya built a bunch of palaces and temples that had a stepped pyramid shape. They decorated them with inscriptions and reliefs, which have earned them the reputation of being incredible artists of Mesoamerica. For the Mayans, flat foreheads were the most desirable thing on someone's face. They were generally really into aesthetics, and having a flat forehead was one of the main things where you could meet their highest aesthetic standard. They also liked to glam up their looks with makeup and clothing. Also, the Mayans were master tattoo artists. Actually, they were one of the first civilizations that started doing such forms of body art. They had a rich culture and believed in many things, such as fairies. Many civilizations across the globe believed in these mythical creatures, which had different names everywhere. The Mayans called those creatures aluxes. They would make sculptures of aluxes from wood or clay, take them to the forest, and hide in some secret spots. The Maya believed these sculptures would come to life during the night and take the role of guardians of their land, animals, and crops. The Maya believed caves were entrances that led to the underworld. You can even visit some of these caves if you like. For example, you can explore the jungles of Quintana Roo and Yucatan near Cancun. There are many spots where researchers found artifacts the Mayans had left behind. They were one of the first cultures that learned how to use rubber latex and make, for example, rubber balls for the many interesting games they had, They used natural latex and then probably mixed it with some other natural substances. That's how they came up with the bouncy balls they played with. They also built cool steam baths. The Maya had structures made from stone that looked like something we know today as bathtubs. Plus, they were building heated stone structures we know as sweat houses. Researchers found these in El Salvador and Guatemala, and they were previously hidden under volcanic ash.
Can you tell me what date it is today? Piece of cake. You just look at your smartphone and voila, you immediately know the day, month, and year. But was it always this easy to tell the date? Did the ancient people even have the concept of a year that lasts 365 days? Yes and no. Mayan calendars had cycles. That's close to what we call a year. But the Mayan cycle was much longer, 819 days. And this is where the mystery begins. 819 days compared to what? When does this calendar begin, and when does it end? Scientists were asking themselves this question for decades. They discovered and deciphered the Mayan calendar during the 1940s. Recently, two American scientists, John Linden and Victoria Bricker, came forward with a solution. So, what did they do differently from their predecessors? The duo deciphered the code by broadening their thinking. They expanded the calendar from 819 days to full 45 years. That's 20 times longer than the original cycle. And a pattern started to emerge. This was a major breakthrough because the Maya told time in a complicated way. You can forget about the easy-to-read Arabic numerals we have today. These ancient people used glyphs. These are tiny images that represent characters, something like the icons on your desktop or universal symbols. When you see a little dot with 3 curved lines above it, you know there is a Wi-Fi network available. The Mayan calendar used glyphs that represented animals or natural phenomena. For example, there were symbols for a jaguar and an eagle. Each glyph marked one day. Each cycle is repeated 4 times, 8 and 19 x 4. Let's call these 4 cycles blocks. The Mayas colored each block differently. Scientists thought these colors corresponded to the 4 cardinal directions. Red was east, white, north. West was black, and finally, yellow marked south. But then the 1980s came. Yeah, this was a weird decade. The calculations were all wrong. Researchers determined that the colors were associated with the position of the sun in the sky. It turned out that the color yellow represented the highest point of the sun, which is called a zenith. White was the lowest point, called the nadir. It seems that the calendar showed just how good the ancient Mayas were at astronomy. This is most evident at Chichen Itza. This principal Mayan city is located on the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. There stands an impressive step pyramid. It is dedicated to the feathered serpent deity, and its alignment is perfect. Something marvelous happens here twice a year, during the equinoxes, March and September. These are the times when the sun shines directly over the equator. On these 2 dates, the day and night last the same. At the site of the pyramid, sunlight first illuminates the sculpture of the serpent head at the base of the structure. Then it makes its way up the 91 steps. This creates the illusion that a snake is slithering down the pyramid. Even today, people gather to witness the sight, and it must have been more impressive when the Mayas completed the structure 1050-1300 CE. Do you know what a synodic period is? Neither do I. But Mayan astronomers did. A synodic period is the time that passes before a stellar body does a full lap. For example, this is the period between 2 full moons. When you look from Earth, this period lasts roughly 30 days. And the Mayas were looking at the skies non-stop. They carefully noted the synodic periods of all planets. From Venus to Saturn, these ancient astronomers kept records of nearly all celestial bodies. But what does this have to do with their calendar? The American researchers' calculations revealed the link. Let's take the planet closest to the sun as an example, Mercury. Its synodic period is 117 days. Multiply that by 7 and you get which number? Exactly 8 to 19, 117 x 7 equals 819. Coincidence? Definitely not. Because synodic periods of other planets also neatly match the magical figure 819. But this is not visible from a single Mayan cycle. Scientists had to expand it several times to discover the pattern. There is a reason why no one could decipher the code for so long. They were focused on a single planet. The trick was to add the Mayan calculation for all the planets. Researchers just needed to see the bigger picture. This brings us to the year 2012. Can you remember that some people thought that the world would end on December 21st? That turned out to be a bust. We are alive and well now. But what started this false rumor? The Mayan calendar, of course. You see, these ancient people based their calendar on long periods of all the planets. That included a lot of complicated math and a lot of multiplying. This 2012 was simply the time when their cycle ended. It is known as the long count. This period is the same as our year. For the Mayas, 2012 was something like the 31st of December for us, just an end of a cycle in which they measured time, so there was no need to panic. Those New Year's Eve parties might be a bit wild, but the world doesn't end on January 1st. The Mayas stretched more than their calendar. Rubber was the name of the game. Yes, you've heard it correctly. These ancient people were making different grades of rubber 3,000 years before one famous American did, Charles Goodyear. They would extract natural latex from the rubber tree. This is a milky substance that can be turned into rubber. And they weren't the only ones. Scientists found evidence that their neighbors, the Aztecs and the Olmecs, did the same. But what did they do with rubber? They didn't need car tires, definitely. But it's cool to have a nice pair of sandals for the beach. The Spanish wrote about rubber sole footwear that natives wore. Sadly, scientists still haven't found them. That would be a big step for archaeology. So the Maya were playful with rubber, literally. Researchers guessed that they produced balls from latex. These were bouncy and ranged in size from a softball to a soccer ball. A typical Mayan ball game, pits, involved 2 hoops. You must be thinking basketball, but not quite. The hoops were set on walls, 23 feet high. Compare that to the NBA standard of 10 feet. And the hoop was the other way around. There is also a sweet side to the story of the Mayas. These ancient people enjoyed chocolate. In fact, the modern word chocolate probably comes from their language, xocolotl. This meant bitter water. Okay, you get the bitter part, but why water? The Mayas didn't produce chocolate in the form we know it today. They didn't make bars of chocolate. They drank it. Smashed cocoa beans made for excellent drinks. The Mayas perfected the mixture over time and even added spices. Anyone up for a fiery chocolate drink with stew peppers and cornmeal? Who knows, maybe this beverage actually tasted well. Cocoa beans were sacred and used as a currency. Researchers believe all social classes got to enjoy it. Free chocolate for all sounds nice even today. But where did the Mayas get clean water for their cocoa drinks? From the oldest known filtration system in the Western Hemisphere. It was based on zeolite. These are minerals that contain aluminum and silicone compounds. And guess what? Modern air and water purifiers still use this material. Mayan tech wins yet again. Back in Europe, Roger Bacon developed a sand filtration system in 1627, some 1,800 years after the Mayas. But what about regions without rivers, lakes, or springs? Mayan engineers had it all figured out. Rainwater. They would carve out large reservoirs in the limestone bedrock. Then, they would coat these underground caves with a layer of a watertight material. The final step was to make small channels that collected water from the hills above. Scientists estimated that just one of these reservoirs could hold on average 10,000 gallons of rainwater, enough to fill 55 modern hot tubs.
So, imagine you're 15 and you get bored of playing video games. Instead, to pass the time, you decide to give some attention to an old hobby of yours, tracking down lost Mayan cities. You've heard that some ancient civilizations are said to have built entire cities based on constellations, so you decide to check out whether that was true for the Mayans. You find a book containing all the constellations the Mayan civilization believed to exist. You open good old Google Maps and map every ancient Mayan city discovered to date. You start seeing that this information actually matches. And truly, the biggest ancient Mayan cities correspond to the brightest and biggest stars of the Mayan constellations. Okay, this is getting interesting. You manage to map out over 100 ancient cities when you suddenly notice something strange. There's an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. Could this mean there is a long-lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? You might think this sounds too daydreaming, but the story is actually true. The previous account happened to a Canadian teenager named William Gaddery. The boy is known as a science genius and had even won an award for the constellation theory we presented just now. When he noticed that a third city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to scour the internet for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. He looked into images from NASA, JAXA, a Japan-based satellite company, and Google Earth. These images were still insufficient to answer his questions, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency. His friend provided him with state-of-the-art satellite imagery that gave him the answer he was looking for. According to the images, there is a large square area right on the border of Mexico and Belize, which looks like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert known as Dr. Armand Larocque from the University of New Brunswick. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. The scientific and archaeological community went crazy with the 15-year-old's discovery. Could this really be true? Some background. Lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century. Since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. They began to settle in the area as early as 1500 BCE. Experts believe that, at its height, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities, with a population of millions of people. That's a crowd. And their cities were pretty interesting. Their civilization spanned over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They survived mainly on agriculture, so they developed a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for ball games. The Mayans were keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets, such as Venus and Mars, and they were able to predict the exact dates of eclipses. That's why the methodology William used to discover this long-lost Mayan city was unusual, but not completely surreal. The Mayans were keen astronomers, so it wouldn't be too strange that they built their major architectural feats in relation to the sky, would it? And they wouldn't be the first ones to be doing so. There is a famous fringe of Egyptology dedicated to studying how the Giza pyramids were built in perfect alignment with the Orion constellation, meaning that each pyramid was purposely built to align with one of the major stars of Orion's belt. According to William, he first had the idea to look at the Mayan constellations because he couldn't understand why the Mayans built their cities where they built them. Most major cities, such as Chichen Itza and Uxmal, aren't near any rivers or significant bodies of water. Instead, they're built on marginal lands and on top of mountains, which confused the 15-year-old. His next thought was that it might have something to do with astronomy. William named the new city he discovered Mouth of Fire, which is also my nickname, and he even won a merit award for his hard work. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Some archaeologists say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Anthony Aveni, a renowned anthropologist and astronomer, referred to William's methodology as an act of creative imagination. He explained that there is no way to be sure what the Mayan constellations really were. It's all just hypothetical. Another debunking of William's findings came from Mayanist David Stewart, who said that the object identified on the satellite imagery is nothing but an old cornfield. His claim was supported by an expedition that took place near the area in 2021, when the archaeologists present reported there was nothing at all in this area. Still, a 15-year-old boy almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. Similar techniques as those used by William are actually being used to unearth lost civilizations all over the world. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parquet, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in Egypt and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any sign of where there could have been cities long ago. What happens, she says, is that any time you have something buried, It's going to be covered either by vegetation, soil or sand, or some other modern construction on top of it. In order to assess whether there is something hidden under large canopies of vegetation or not, she uses infrared technology, for instance. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done in a similar way. Satellite imagery detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people. But in this case, the satellite imagery did indeed correspond to what was on the ground. Researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls, centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. Advances in satellite tech have also shed new light on long-discovered ancient Mayan cities, such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It was composed of a series of complex monuments, many of them believed to have been the resting places of kings and chiefs. Tikal is already known to have been big, but recent discoveries show it could have been even 3 times larger than what scientists originally believed. The main discovery revolves around a fortification on the outskirts of the city, indicating how far the original city stretched. And new discoveries still take place. In 2017, researchers also unearthed new clues regarding the potential causes of the decline of the Mayan civilization. Using data from a site in Cebu located 62 miles southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the sudden demise of this great civilization. The information shows that, instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely collapsed in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. Well, it seems like it's a prime time to uncover ancient ruins. What do you say? Will you give it a try as well?
Imagine discovering an ancient city without leaving the comfort of your home. In 1963, a man in the Nevşehir province of Turkey did exactly that. He was renovating his house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He continued digging and saw a tunnel. This is how Daren Kuyu underground city was found. Daren Kuyu is one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements of Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. This engineering masterpiece has 8 levels. The inhabitants living on those floors had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors are connected by an extensive network of tunnels. It's believed that the underground city was built as a shelter. You can't see the construction from the outside. Its depth is approximately 279 feet. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people, plus their livestock and food supplies. There's also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. People used it both for ventilation and as a well. The well supplied water both to the villagers living on the surface and to those hiding in the underground city. Interestingly, those living on the bottom levels were able to cut off the water supply for the upper and ground levels. This kept the water safe from potential poisoning. The place was designed for protection. The tunnels could be blocked from the inside with huge round rolling stone doors. The passageways were extremely narrow. Potential invaders had to enter the tunnels one at a time. Seems like they thought of everything in the 7th century BCE. Archaeologists believed the Phrygians were the ones who first built the levels. After them, the structure was used and enhanced in Roman times. This was when the chapels were added. The golden time of Daren Kuyu, however, was during the Byzantine era. But how did these people manage to create such tunnels? Well, the rock they carved them into wasn't usual. It was soft volcanic rock. It appeared due to a geological process that began millions of years ago. Volcanic eruptions covered the area in thick ash. It then solidified into this soft rock. When the natural forces of wind and water eroded softer parts, only hard elements remained. Fun fact, fairy chimneys are also made of intricately shaped volcanic soft rock, but they formed naturally without any human intervention. I'm still in Turkey, but this time, my destination is Çanakkale, where a myth came to life. For 3,000 years, people believed that Homer's Iliad was fiction and that Troy never existed. In 1863, everything changed. Expatriate Frank Calvert discovered ancient ruins in western Turkey. He was convinced they belonged to the ancient city of Troy. Heinrich Schliemann examined this area in 1868. That's when Troy saw sunlight again after all those centuries. Troy has complex layers. Over the years, 9 ancient cities were built on top of one another. Historians say that the area was strategically located between Europe and Asia, so it became a prosperous trade and cultural center. This strategic position made Troy attractive throughout history. After the Trojan conflict, the city was abandoned between the years 1100 to 700 BCE. Then Greek settlers rediscovered the area, and Alexander the Great ruled there. The Romans then invaded the city. Speaking of this event, the first thing you would see when visiting the site is a replica of the wooden Trojan horse from a movie shot in 2004. The next stop is Lothal. In the 1950s, Lothal and several other Harappan sites were discovered in India. These new provinces extended the boundaries of the Indus Valley civilization. Lothal was an important part of the Harappan civilization. It had vast cotton and rice fields. Plus, it had a bead-making factory. Beads were made from semi-precious stones, like agate. Many of these beads were later found in Mesopotamia, which serves as evidence that Lothal was a thriving trading port. Archaeologists believe that the city was part of an ancient trade route. Traces of agriculture? Check. Traces of trade? Check. What else? The remains of residential buildings, streets, bathing pavements, and drains. Some real city planning, and impressive examples of early urbanization. The town was well constructed. There were modern houses. Some of them had 6 rooms, bathrooms, a large courtyard, and even a veranda. Lothal also had the world's oldest known dock. It linked the city with the Sabarmati River and the trade route. The ancient Mayan city of Calakmul is located in southern Mexico in the tropical forest of the Tierras Bajas. From 500 CE to 800 CE, Calakmul was home to over 50,000 people. There was a central plaza surrounded by outer districts. And if we count both the inhabitants of all those outer areas and those who lived in the center, Calakmul had a population of more than 1.5 million people. It was a city that was habitable for 12 centuries. It's believed that the place had more constructions than any other excavated Maya settlements in the region. After 1000 CE, the Maya civilization there faced a downfall. The settlement that was once the center of Mesoamerica was almost completely abandoned. The ancient city was at the heart of the second largest tropical forest in America. The site is well preserved, so today, if you were to visit it, you would be able to picture what life looked like in ancient Mayan times. The city remains include architectural complexes and sculpted monuments, defensive systems, quarries, water management features, agricultural terraces, massive temple pyramids, and palaces, not to mention a variety of body ornaments and other accompanying objects. It proves that complex state-organized societies lived in this tropical forest. The Mayans depicted nature in their paintings, pottery, sculptures, rituals, and even food. I'm moving on to a place people thought didn't really exist. The city of Thonis Heraklion appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts. Turns out, it was waiting to be discovered for thousands of years. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt. But then, archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Heraklion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, There were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists consider a 16-foot-tall statue and the temple remains the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Amun. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals. You can think of it as an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Thonis Heraklion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, Heraklion got covered with water. Then, Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heraklion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heraklion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So, after the disaster, many ships heading for Heraklion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heraklion lost its glory until its rediscovery in 1933. Mesa Verde is an American national park in Colorado. The park is the largest archaeological preserve in the U.S., with more than 5,000 sites, including 600 cliff dwellings. Mesa Verde means green table in Spanish. The name comes from the shape of the mountains in the area, with flat tops and steep sides. The park is an ancestral Puebloan archaeological site. Starting from 7500 BCE, a group of nomadic Paleo-Indians seasonally lived in Mesa Verde. They were hunters, gatherers, and crop farmers. They built the first pueblos in the region. By the end of the 12th century, the Mesa Verdeans began constructing massive cliff dwellings, which are now the best-known structures in the park.
What you're viewing is recognized as the most densely populated location to have ever existed. It spans just 6.4 acres, which is equivalent to 13 Starbucks coffee shops located in the Empire State Building. And while a huge coffee shop like this one can host, say, 1,000 guests, this place somehow managed to have around 33,000 people squeezed in. Some estimates suggest that the actual number could have soared to 50,000 at some point. This is Kowloon walled city. The city is relatively young, settled in 1898, but its history goes back nearly 1,000 years to the Song dynasty. Originally a modest fortification, it remained largely unchanged until renovations in 1847 added defensive walls, leading to its revival a half-century later. But back then, the area was sparsely populated rather than crowded. To really understand just how packed this area got by the mid-20th century, let's compare it to some others. Take the East Village in New York City, for example. It has a little park at its center, but mostly it's filled with a mix of historic homes and newer apartment buildings. As of 2010, it was home to over 44,000 people, making it way more crowded than the rest of New York City, which is saying a lot, since New York City is the most densely populated city in the US. By most standards, it's pretty busy. But then you look at Kowloon walled city, and it's a whole different ballgame. If all the land there could be split proportionally between the residents, that would be somewhere around 5.5 to 8.5 square feet per person, if we count land only. While science claims people need 200 to 400 square feet at home just to feel good. So, why was everything crammed together like that? Well, it comes down to Kowloon walled city's unique status. It was never officially part of the rest of Hong Kong. What started as a small Chinese military outpost became more significant when a larger fort was built nearby, coinciding with the rise of Canton Harbor. After the fall of the Qing dynasty, this site transformed into a tourist destination, eventually becoming home to around 400 squatters. However, in the 1930s, the Hong Kong authorities intervened, relocating the inhabitants and demolishing the dilapidated structures. The 1940s and 50s were pretty rough times for folks in Kowloon. And while the residents were somewhat accustomed to different countries vying for control over their land, they were definitely caught off guard by natural disasters. In January 1950, a massive fire broke out that wiped over 2,500 huts, leaving almost 3,500 families, which is about 17,000 people without homes. This disaster really underscored the need for better fire safety measures, especially in the squatter areas made mainly of wood. The problem didn't end there. Due to the lack of control from both the Chinese and British authorities, except for a handful of operations conducted by the Hong Kong police, the walled city became a refuge for illegal activities. It was not until a trial in 1959, which took place within the walled city's boundaries, that the Hong Kong government was officially recognized as having jurisdiction there. By that time, however, organized crime groups known as triads had already established dominance over the area. Starting in the 1950s, triad factions such as the 14K and Sun Yee-un took control of all the criminal dens within the walled city. The environment became so dangerous that police would only enter in large numbers. It wasn't until 1973 and 1974 when over 3,500 police operations led to more than 2,500 arrests and the confiscation of illegal produce that the influence of the triads began to diminish. Only a decade later, the local police chief announced that the crime rate in the walled city was now under control. And even though crime dropped, the walled city still became known for having a surprising number of unlicensed doctors and dentists who could work there without fear of getting into trouble. That was a win-win. Many working-class people couldn't afford licensed dentists somewhere in Hong Kong, so they would go to Kowloon to receive affordable health care. You get it now. What can attract people in such a seedy place? Right, it's zero oversight. And zero oversight means that anyone could start their business here, no matter how shady it was. However, there were some totally normal entrepreneurs. For example, noodle makers. Despite all the dangers, the population of the city kept growing. But how can you create more houses if your territory is very limited? Simple. Think vertically, not horizontally. So local developers started stacking more and more stories, as if those were Lego bricks you could easily add on top of your tower. This led to a crazy population boom, making the city feel like a little world of its own, with over 33,000 people being crammed into 300 buildings on just about 7 acres. By the late 70s and early 80s, the city hit its peak size. But that came with some quirks. However, there were limits on how tall buildings could go. Those could not exceed 13 to 14 stories, and it was because of planes flying into Kai Tak Airport. Yeah, living close to the airport meant residents had to deal with a lot of noise. Water was provided through 8 municipal pipes, although there were options for wells too. Some streets barely saw any natural light thanks to the way buildings were packed in, and fluorescent lights were the go-to for illumination down below. It was nighttime all the time in there. So, the city buildings were pretty tall, yet the city had merely 2 elevators for its entirety. At the base of various skyscrapers, both shared and private mailboxes were affixed to the walls. Frequently, This left the postman with no choice but to ascend on foot. Even several floors high, the tangled network of paths persisted. Intricate passages that wound their way into the city's core through a web of bridges and staircases. But let's say you live in such a place and want to have a walk or just a bit of fresh air. What do? In such cramped conditions, rooftops will serve you 1,000 purposes. They can be a space for physical activities and a kid's playground, but they can also be used as venues for pigeon racing, with residents making their guess concerning which pigeon comes first. And it's illegal for sure. Such rooftops can pose certain risks because of the narrow spaces between the buildings. But locals use them also as landfills. The absence of efficient garbage collection led to some residents to transport their larger waste items up to the roof. Consequently, many rooftops became crowded with abandoned mattresses, damaged furniture, and appliances. Hey, I get the feeling that I'm talking about something that actually exists. Sorry for that, I totally forgot to mention the most important thing. This city ceased its existence back in the 1990s. What happened? Long story short, both Chinese and British authorities grew increasingly weary of the chaos unfolding in the city. Control was difficult, if not impossible. Criminals kept proliferating and the area was in disarray. Consequently, officials from both countries chipped in and allocated approximately $350 million in compensation for the locals, who had been kicked out of that area as the city was demolished. Kowloon exists today, but not as the infamous walled city. It's now an urban area in Hong Kong, which is located in a completely different place. It just has the same name. As for the area that used to be Kowloon, there's now a park known as Kowloon Walled City Park. Architects and thinkers still look back at Kowloon as a prime example of the organic megastructure concept from the 60s, which envisions cities as flexible networks that grow and change with their residents. Almost forgot. If you're looking to catch a glimpse of the real deal, you should watch Crime Story, starring Jackie Chan, as some scenes were filmed there. You're standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert in Saudi Arabia. But in the middle of that emptiness, two enormous mirrored skyscrapers rise side by side, in perfect parallel to each other. This isn't just some sci-fi concept, it's the line, the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's boldest urban project yet. Now, Saudi Arabia is already home to some of the most ambitious architecture in the world, from Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District to the iconic Abraj Al Bayt Towers in Mecca. They've been working hard for years. But the line is in a league of its own. This project was announced in 2021, and it is part of a larger vision for the country's future called NEOM, a $500 billion mega project designed to redefine how people live, work, and interact with the environment. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, I don't know, but Nadmi Al Nasser, the longtime chief executive of the ambitious project, has recently departed. Suspicious. Even more so because NEOM's statement issued soon after did not give any plausible reason for his departure. Then, the line project itself was originally expected to cost around $200 billion. But by 2024, that number had skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $2 trillion. That's about twice Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. And if you ask independent experts, they think it could end up costing even more. At first, the plan was to build about 10 miles of the project and have 1.5 million people living there by 2030. By now, the expectations are way more modest. Only just under 1.5 miles are likely to be done by 2030, with fewer than 300,000 residents. The project has come across a lot of problems along the way. Engineering issues and management problems have caused major delays, and progress hasn't been as fast as hoped. And now, let's figure out what exactly is the line. It's a literal city made up of 2 parallel skyscrapers, each towering 1,640 feet high. That's higher than almost all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. These skyscrapers are 656 feet wide and stretch for a mind-boggling 106 miles across the northwest of Saudi Arabia, right near the Red Sea. The most astounding thing? The entire city is actually within this one structure. There are no cars, no roads, no emissions. But we'll go into detail a bit later. The complex is supposed to house 9 million people, and all of this running entirely on clean energy. Such a project aligns perfectly with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. The outside of the skyscrapers will be covered in mirrors that will reflect the surrounding desert landscape, creating an almost seamless blend between the city and its surroundings. Inside, there will be lush parks, cascading waterfalls, flying taxis, and even robot helpers to take care of everyday tasks. They're also planning to make an artificial moon as part of the city's design. One more thing that makes the line so unique is its design. Unlike traditional cities that spread out horizontally, the line is vertical. Everything, homes, offices, parks, schools, shopping centers, are stacked on top of each other in layers. This means that residents won't need to travel long distances to get what they need. In fact, the designers promise that all amenities will be within a 5-minute walk from anywhere in the city. And while it's compact in width, the city's vertically layered structure means it can comfortably fit all 9 million residents, while leaving plenty of room for parks, natural spaces, and modern conveniences. There's even a plan for year-round climate control, keeping both indoor and outdoor spaces at comfortable temperatures, no matter how harsh the desert weather gets. Of course, even with everything close by, people will still need to get around the city. Worry not, the line has it covered in the most futuristic way possible. It features a high-speed train system that will travel from one end of the city to the other in just 20 minutes. That's 106 miles in 20 minutes with only 4 stops along the way. Imagine being able to get anywhere in the city faster than you could drive across town in most places today. Besides the train, the line will also have autonomous vehicles. Those will be cars and shuttles driving themselves with the help of advanced technology. They will handle everything from parking to going around obstacles. Even cooler, in the line, every car, train, and any other piece of infrastructure will be connected in a huge network called the Internet of Things. Sensors and real-time data will allow traffic to flow smoothly, preventing delays and reducing congestion. They first spoke about the NEOM project in 2017. Besides the line, NEOM is supposed to include an octagon-shaped floating industrial city and a posh mountain ski resort. There, Saudi Arabia will host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Plus, there will be the world's largest green energy plant, which will make the region self-sufficient and sustainable. The goal of NEOM is to attract people from around the world, not just to visit, but to live there. Residents will even be given their own identity, Neomians. Not everyone thinks this construction is a good idea. Some urban planners and architects have pointed out pretty big flaws in the city's straight-line layout. You see, in a regular city like Johannesburg, which covers way more ground than the line, 2 random people are usually only about 20 miles apart. But in the line, the average distance between 2 random people would be 35 miles. That's almost double, even though the line's overall area is way smaller. This setup could make it harder for people to connect socially and might be a pain to navigate, even with a high-speed train zipping through it. Now, they promise that every resident will have everything they need within a 5-minute walk, but there are doubts too. People wonder if living in a super compact, stacked-up design might end up feeling claustrophobic or even too much to handle. As for the whole mirrored exterior idea, it looks pretty cool in renderings. But there's an opinion it could actually mess with the environment. Reflecting all that sunlight in a desert might disturb local wildlife or create unexpected heat issues. The line's high-tech features sound amazing, but they come with their own set of headaches. The city is supposed to run on the Internet of Things tech and autonomous vehicles. Sounds awesome, right? But how are they going to pull that off for a 106-mile-long city? For things to run smoothly, every piece of tech, cars, trains, infrastructure, needs to be perfectly in sync, sharing tons of real-time data. If there's even a tiny glitch, it could throw a wrench into daily life for millions of people. Then there's that high-speed train. It does sound like a dream, but actually building and keeping it running in the middle of a desert is not so easy. The heat, shifting sands, and wear and tear on the tracks could cause big delays and rack up costs pretty quickly. People around the world are questioning if the line is even doable. The first inhabitants were supposed to start living there by 2030, but there are reports about scaling the project back, so that deadline feels like a big stretch. There's also a sustainability issue. The line is supposed to have zero emissions and 100% clean energy. But building something so massive is bound to take tons of resources. With all these challenges, Saudi Arabia is looking into new ways to fund the line and figure out which parts of their Vision 2030 projects to prioritize. An insider has recently said that some projects might go ahead as planned, while others could be delayed or scaled down. This lines up with what Ali Shahabi, who's on NEOM's advisory board, has said. He admitted that the Vision 2030 goals were always meant to be super ambitious. Like, almost too ambitious. But he argued that even if they